very not healthy.
It was a delicious shake.
It is delicious with whipped cream on it. That's melting in there, but.
Did I ever tell you guys, I don't enjoy sitting in this seat. I don't like
I
sitting
wouldn't
here.
either.
I'd rather sit there.
Janet, you look very patriotic.
Very patriotic. Oh, with the
With
back.
the flag in the background and the whole deal.
Yeah, it's all good. All right, 5:30, here we go. Planning Committee, March 5th, 2025. All planning members are present, so we're gonna go ahead and get started right away because we have Drew Howick in the house today. Drew is here. Let me give a little background. If you recall, we did some work with the collective commitments. Charity, this is new for you, but you saw those at orientation. So the collective commitments are things that we had all agreed upon as a board and how we are going to function. And we're
Ian Pilot.
Join the meeting.
Being a more highly productive, what's the word? Highly efficient, higher performing board. I'm looking for the words there. And we had started some work on that pathway. We had recognized in the last year that board policy says we should be doing some self-evaluation of us as a board, not necessarily self, but could be interpreted multiple ways. So this past year, these past few months, we worked on pulling together a board evaluation. And after sitting down with Drew multiple times, whether it be at state convention or just conversations leading up to this, thought upon what should that survey look like. And School Perceptions has a survey. It's, 5, 6, 7 pages long, probably take 10 to 15 minutes to complete. You've seen some school perceptions things. And I thought, oh, we could condense that. We could, I'm like, hey, let's go. And Drew pulls in the reins. Diana, that's gold. We need to start somewhere. Maybe we can look to achieve that at some point, but we need to find ways to dig into what do we best want to do and see for ourselves as a board. And so his suggestion was, let's start with the collective commitments as opposed to the survey that we had before, because those are things that we all had agreed upon. And so we thought that would be a great starting point for us to start looking there. And I just gave you the background of our conversations. I tried to do it in about 30 seconds, and I'm gonna hand it 100% over to Drew, and he's gonna kind of guide the ship to where we go, because this has never been Diana's pushing this. This has been, we were lacking in board policy. And so how do we catch up in board policy to where we need to be, and how are we gonna go about doing that? I thought the survey the first time around was a good first step. Was it a great survey? No. Was it a good first step? Yeah, the first step is always the hardest. And so hopefully now we have something that we can all rally behind and around and take that moving forward. So Drew, just so y'all know, we've scheduled about 60 minutes for this. We have a few things going on. This is of high priority. So if this goes longer than our scheduled time, it goes longer than if it goes shorter, I'm not going to do a hard stop. Just so, okay? All you, Drew.
Great, thank you. Who's with us on the phone?
We have Craig Ortman, who's a board member,
Great,
and someone that I do not know.
okay.
So a community member.
Hi, Greg. I'll assume that went out.
Well, and sometimes it's hard as you're trying to fumble for the talk.
I'm here. How you
There we
doing?
go, see?
All right, great. Thanks for being here.
So I'm
Greg.
gonna let you be due diligence on if Craig has his, do the
Absolutely,
conversation,
yeah,
just because you have access to that.
Great. Well, I was greeted by Jason when I came in, who I had not met before, and he says, it's customary for guests to planning meetings to bring dinner.
Apologize, we didn't get that memo to you
Yeah.
before you walked in.
I apologize for not reading your mind. So,
I thought about bringing Oreos, it's National Oreo Day.
yeah, you got to shake. Yeah. Yeah, so let me just build a little bit on the background of this. I've been invited to work with the board for 2 years in a row. And we've done work around roles and responsibilities, and also on, as Diana mentioned, collective commitments, which are behaviors and processes that, if followed, would lead to higher quality discussions and ultimately better decisions. That's the premise for this. So we did some of that work last year for an offsite, and we had 2 offsites this year where we reviewed those roles and responsibilities. What does the board own? What does the administration own? And what do you own together? So there's documentation of the outcome of those discussions. We also spent some time looking at a survey that was done in October 2024. And for those who are visual, it looked something like this. And I think 8 out of 9 board members at the time participated in this. And it was a first step, as Diana mentioned. But there wasn't necessarily full understanding or buy-in to the process. I think that's fair to say in terms of all board members. There were some questions about anonymity because some people preferred comments be anonymous and some concerns about that. So we took the results of some of the results of that survey and we talked them through a little bit. And there were some issues that came up and board members, I think, felt comfortable kind of working through some of those issues. But I didn't feel we got real good closure on, so what does this information tell us? What are the implications for how we perform even more effectively and so on? So Diana, as the chair of this committee, reached out and says, okay, let's talk about board assessment. First off, it is a policy that the board will dedicate some time on a quote regular unquote basis, and we have to talk about what that means, to take the time to assess how well the board is performing. Your district has a policy that Diana shared with me. You are transitioning to some Neola policies, which also have those built into it, a very similar policy as part of Neola's recommendations. And that's very consistent with my experience in working with high-performing teams, committees, task force, boards, whatever, is that you assess your effectiveness. You can do it as a collective, you can do it as individuals, you can do both. There's a lot of ways to do it. But we know that high-performing groups, teams, et cetera, they all dedicate some effort towards that. So as Diane and I were talking about this, and we were with Jared when we were at the state convention as well, we were raising questions. All right, well, where should we as a board start? We tried this. Do we want to keep pursuing this method that you did before? You want to contract with WSP and School Perceptions and do their survey, which is very comprehensive. And we talked about a variety of things. And my recommendations were that you start with assessing your effectiveness on your collective commitments, because this is something that you created. You weren't part of that, but I think you've seen it, right, Charity? Goodness, greetings. Good. That we use the collective commitments that you created and put them into a format where everyone would have a chance anonymously to evaluate how well they think the board has been performing with regards to these commitments. So it's not somebody else's questions, they're your questions, they're your commitments. And we can do it in a way that provides anonymity, which some people think that's helpful. I would point out that ultimately you want to get to the point where you don't feel you have to be anonymous. You want to say, that was me, and this is how I feel, and this is why. And it's like, then you use that as a data to have those discussions. But I think based on your efforts to become a higher performing board, a process like this on something real simple, a Google Doc or a SurveyMonkey, something like that, very simple. And that we would use these 10 or so collective commitments that you created and give everybody a chance to rate how they think the board has been performing over the past, and I think we have to decide X amount of time. And that you would use that data as a starting point and dedicate some time at a board meeting to just go through the results and ask yourself, so what does this mean? What does this tell us? And what do we want to do in response to the responses? Are there areas, for example, you want to acknowledge you're doing an admirable job on those things? Are there areas where there's mixed perceptions? You know, someone says you're doing great and someone else is saying, you gotta be kidding. You know, and then you have a conversation to share perspectives. Or are there some areas that collectively you say, you know, this is an area we need to work on and to do better and talk that through, essentially. I'm summarizing part of what Diana said and capturing my recommendations as someone who works with a lot of organizations and boards of education. It's part of your policy, whether it be the Watertown or the Neola. It's best practices, even if it wasn't a policy, I would still say this is good practice for any organization that wants to get better. So I'll just pause. Diana spoke, I spoke, just to see if you have any questions for clarity. And then if not, or if we do, and then we'll talk about how it gets from concept to reality. So.
Committee members first. Questions, comments, concerns?
Just point of clarification from a historical perspective, has there been any conversation to date about frequency of how
Yes.
often this happened?
So we'll get into that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Typically, once or twice a year is what we're considering, or will be part of the discussion later.
Okay. Then I'll save some questions.
Yeah,
I think-
but I will put out right, go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think the policy says at least
Policy originally said twice,
the new
so we had,
Neola, I
yeah,
think,
says
is
at
once
least
a year.
once.
Yeah.
So-
Originally, in the conversation we had, Drew had recommended once, but now talking to him,
Oh, yeah,
twice.
yeah.
No,
I'm just
so
saying
through
at
this,
least
yes.
once a year, I think
Yes.
is a safe
Yeah.
ground.
Thank you.
Craig, I didn't want to think that you excluded you, just committee first. Anything at this
I don't have
time?
questions right now.
And I'm happy to start with that question right there. My recommendation is that at this point, you might want to look at this twice a year. And as opposed to, well, once a year, I think so many things can occur in a year. It's hard to really look back at something, you tend to look back at your last meeting and go, well, that's what happened last meeting. Looking back at 9 months ago, who remembers, right? And I think it gives you more data points than just doing an evaluation after one meeting, evaluation after every meeting. I know very few boards that have committed to doing it after each meeting and still think there's value in doing that. One meeting can go just so well and the next meeting, for whatever reason, doesn't. And there you are, so you got yin and you got yang, and it's just like there's no themes there. But I think if you take a period of time, such as 5 or 6 months, and knowing that everyone's gonna have an opportunity to say, this is how I perceive we're doing over that period of time, it gives you enough data to work with. The second thing it does is that it also builds in room for when there is turnover in your board. So you have an election coming up. Board members, your board may change. I don't know the details here. Some years the board changed significantly. Others, it's same group. So it gives you then that period of time. And one of the things that Diana and I talked about was there might be an opportunity for you to do an evaluation with your existing board before your new board comes, and then you have some data to look at. And then once you have a new board, and starting in April, fast forward maybe 6 months, so sometime in the fall, say, we will now, all new board members, all board members will have a chance to weigh in on the board's performance over that period of time. So I don't know if I summarized that accurately. Based
You
on-
did. The
okay.
only, the additional piece to that is using the, like if we did it now in March, for example, that would then give data points for us then to look at as a planning committee to go through, okay, for board development, for the new board coming in that new year term, what does the data tell us? We ask our administration, we ask our staff to be data informed decision makers. This would give us data as well. It's saying this, I, in the last couple of years, have been collecting data as the chair. This is what's been said, or this is what I've heard at meetings. This is just a better process than that. So,
And you and I had talked about mentoring new board members, and it would be good if, you know, that there was gonna be a 6-month evaluation, that we tell them upfront, take notes on how you think the effectiveness is working, so they're not surprised by it and say, well, I don't know, you know, I haven't really been keeping track, so they know there will be an evaluation.
can you
So,
hold that thought? So when we come back to orientation,
Yeah.
we're gonna do that later in the meeting. They already talked about collective commitments. Maybe what I'm kind of hearing, I'd like the discussion, but further,
Sure,
do we inform them about the survey at that point? Just, hey, keep an ear out. Let's hold
Okay.
that piece for that if you would. That'll serve us better in the orientation piece, but I agree that I think an underlying thing of what you were saying is a new board member, it's too soon for them to take a survey in April right away, giving them 6 months under their belt, but needing to take note of, hey, what am I looking for? The collective commitments are something that for the last 2 years, we haven't really put in our forefront. And one of the pieces, working with Drew with this survey, the other piece adding to the summary part is, this helps to get those collective commitments in our forefront. So then it would be a natural transition. So yes, thank you for bringing that up.
And if I can just build on that, it's, they know that these are the things, these commitments that were created by you, or what people will be using as a way to assess the board's performance. Then they have an eye towards that, as opposed to somebody else's survey or whatever. And the other comment I'll make too is, the moving forward in this way, it does not lock you into doing this forever, right? It's just a way to start the process. And you may find after a couple of assessments, a year from now, whatever, yeah, we're not quite getting to the things that we think are more important. It's like, oh, okay, what are those things? So you can modify this as you go, but it seems to me you've done a great deal of work just getting to this. Now it's just a matter of putting it into an assessment process. And I've seen SurveyMonkey's a real simple 1 to 5 scale. You know, 1 is we are not doing this, and 5 we're rocking it. We are doing all these things and everything in between. And then you just let the data speak. And then you dedicate some time to looking at it and ask the so what question. So you have the collective commitments. I don't think there's any need to go through that, other than these are all things that I think represent best practices, or at least promising practices for any board of education that I've worked with. And you worked through these, you've modified them a little bit, you've clarified them and know what they are. To Diana's point, by doing them in an assessment, you also start kind of understanding, well, what do we mean by that? We will be receptive to other perspectives while remaining objective in decision-making. Well, what is that? How does that play out? What does that really mean? And I think you'll get clear about those. And you may also find, I've seen this in other boards, that they'll go, you know, I've thought of some couple other commitments we ought to consider that we just, for whatever reason, didn't think about last time. Or, I don't know if that's really that important to us anymore. Oh, okay. Talk it through, make decisions, commit to it. starting to repeat myself, I realize I think it's just it's an easy way to start, easy not as in simple, but just effort-wise, you've done great work, let's put it in some kind of form, let's get it out, let's get the responses in a timely fashion, and then let's dedicate some time to looking at the results. So, what else should we cover here in terms of the process?
I think we should come up with, you've done a lot of talking, but let's come up with consensus. So with that, we have talked briefly about once a year, twice a year, you gave your recommendation, let's solidify that.
Okay.
So 1 time a year or 2 times a year. I agree with Drew that my recommendation would be twice a year, so that way we have, it's kind of like a middle of the year assessment and an end of the year assessment, except our board term ends in March, not in June, not in December. So it just makes sense as an end of the year assessment to come in March, and then a mid-year assessment to come about 6 months. That would be September, October-ish, give or take. I don't know if September is enough. Technically, that's about the 6-month range, because you haven't really gotten a lot of the school year into you yet. But I guess we'd have to kind of take a look. We don't need to solidify that date at this point, but what other things are going on as far as superintendent evaluate, does all of that stuff matter? There's what, 12 commitments? Just because we take it, we have time to be able to analyze it and things. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, how are we collecting it? SurveyMonkey is something that you had suggested. Is that something we all agree to? And then the piece that we haven't connected with yet is who's collecting it and how are we analyzing it? And those are just pieces that became part of some of the discussion previously, at a very surface level. But as we kind of go through it, if we're developing this process or this plan, I guess I'd kind of like to have the structure set up. We don't need to have it perfect, but we need to at least have the who, what, those structural pieces. And the rest of it, anytime you do something the first time, the first year, I don't want to stumble through it, but I know I'm a perfectionist. It's hard for me to say this. It's not going to be perfect the first time, but I don't want to fumble through it, because that's a waste of time, energy, and effort. So can we first and foremost agree twice a year? Is there any objection to twice a year the way it's been described?
No. Can I make a suggestion that we don't pick a month, that we pick spring and fall, so we have a little wiggle room? We may want to, like, this is Lori's last meeting here, we may want to have heard what she thought a month earlier, so we have another month to discuss it with her here. So instead of March, it might be.
So we can look at that. That would then, I'm not saying no to
No.
that. What I'm saying is we would need to take it, analyze it, pull it together for the discussion pieces. So the discussion part to that at the end of the year one wouldn't come until probably a month or 2 after. Do you know what I'm saying? And so with that, it's kind of I understand the commentary on it, because there's value to, hey, why did you think that? So that's something that we hadn't talked about in there, unless you have a comment section with it. We just don't want it to be too early on, because it's a summative piece.
Right.
So maybe you and I, Drew, can kick that around. I don't know what you've seen done in the past. I hadn't thought about that perspective. We had originally thought February, March-ish.
Maybe it's different this year than it could be for other years going forward, just given that we're maybe later in the process to get it started than we want it to be. But maybe to your point, that it is something that happens in February, so we could have March discussions, and then there could be some April turnover.
Sure.
Obviously, we can't do that this time around, but it could be something for future consideration.
I put that down as a note, so
Okay.
kicking, because I originally thought March, but yes, kicking, just February. If we meet March, we don't have to meet in order to, because it'll already be done, it's just pushing it out. Okay, so twice a year, February-ish, discuss in March, 6 months later, we put fall-ish. I am gonna put the February though, just as a concrete date, but fall-ish, be September. Cause as Jason and I do the plans, we put it into a target month, but we have wiggle room.
Okay.
How are we collecting this? So SurveyMonkey
Can you use
is,
Google Forms?
Google
'Cause it's a
Forms is
district
another.
resource.
We can.
Yes, certainly are.
So Drew and I talked briefly about who's collecting it. Who's the one, I know that there was, you all probably, sorry, Charity doesn't. You all probably remember, there were questions and concerns about the anonymity part of it. Google Forms, if we use that, would go to Lynn. Lynn takes all of the names off of it, so that way it's not anonymous for the first couple seconds till she hits delete, deletes everybody's name, then it's anonymous. But as far as who's all seeing it, if there's anybody analyzing it, whatever, it's anonymous. So if there's someone that has issue with that piece, we could do a SurveyMonkey to an outside source like Drew. The question that I have in that, great idea, concept behind it's wonderful. My only caveat or question is, if Drew somehow retires from this, then who do we have doing that? So,
And I don't do surveys,
okay, so that would be, I'm speaking arbitrary, so SurveyMonkey then would go to whom?
Yeah.
So it almost seems easier if it's a Lynn, but I'm not as familiar, so this is a great point for discussion. What do you all think?
It'd be great to be able to go to Lynn and say, who said this?
That's psychological safety, nail it right there.
So there's
Okay,
no way to
you
make
will-
the Google form anonymous?
You can.
You can, if you don't, the way Lynn had described it was you can do that, but then you cannot have the option to get your own responses back. If you want to have your own responses back, then the email is tied to it. So if it's 100% anonymous, then it's, you don't get your own responses. So where does the main value come? Fine?
The biggest concern that I have is if you're creating a public document, basically. When your name is attached to it and then now you deleted it, now you've destroyed that public document. So that's the one concern I have, from a logistics standpoint, like, hey, okay, if it's anonymous, it's anonymous. If it's not, it's not.
So then if we're okay with the Google form, we can use a Google form. You just don't get your responses.
I'm sorry, you just what?
You don't get your responses back
Oh, I see.
if we go that route.
Do you need your own response?
That's a personal thing. I don't need my own responses. If there's some, I can't speak because I don't know, I don't need them. Long surveys, sometimes, yeah, I have the responses just if I know from year to year to year. But I'm not as familiar with SurveyMonkey. Can you get your own responses back with SurveyMonkey and it still be anonymous?
I don't know. I've worked with districts who've used SurveyMonkey, but they did it internally, and I don't know all the logistics of it. Jason, do you have any?
I don't. I know that Google Forms or surveys, you can set it up for not collecting emails, not collecting names. I would have to research if you can forward responses. I think there's an add-on, but I would have to double
Check and see. I distinctly remember Lynn saying that was not possible, but if there's an add-on that she wasn't aware of.
Yep.
So that is something, Jason, we will come as an action item.
Yep.
To bring that back. Well, the question just becomes, what are we doing for this time around? So I guess this time around would be no responses back for this time,
Right.
just so we can do it. Otherwise, we're waiting 2 months.
In SurveyMonkey, you can't print a copy of your responses on an anonymous survey, but the creator can export and print a copy of somebody's response. So it'll be like respondent 1, responded all of this, responded 2, responded all of that.
So if I'm responding 1, my question is, I've taken the survey. do I have access to my responses after I hit submit?
Only if the person who created the survey,
Get some
you
back to
go to
you.
them and say, these
So
are some
then
of the things I said.
It's no longer anonymous.
Yeah.
Right.
So the answer is no.
Correct.
Okay. So then I don't know if there's an advantage to going with SurveyMonkey as opposed to Google at this point. Am I missing anything? Help me fill in a gap.
I think the only other question is, I know that with SurveyMonkey, you can sometimes have surveys up to a certain number of questions for free, and if it's beyond that, there's a cost that you incur, and so Google Forms would be free to us as opposed to potentially a cost for SurveyMonkey. I know it's not significant, but still a cost versus free.
I think I remember that when Tina and I, way back when she was on, wasn't for the board survey. I think it was when we were trying to do the first retreat. I think we looked at survey and there was a fee.
After so
So I
many
do remember
questions.
that, yeah.
So I'm hearing not a whole lot of pushing SurveyMonkey. So looking more into Google Forms at this point in time. I have an action item to review this in a year. To look, and at that point, making some adjustments. Again, it's a first year through. We're gonna stumble. This is not what's gonna be set in stone. So in a year, taking a look and reviewing Google or not, as well as the questions that we have. Are we sticking with the collective commitments or are we moving to something else? The other thing I have on here for my questions was, who is analyzing the data? Typically, it is, well, I'll let you speak, because I was going typically off of what you and I have talked about. When it comes to other districts doing surveys, typically, who is the one that kind of breaks down and analyzes the data? If you go to School Perceptions, you can pay School Perceptions to analyze the data and then bring it back. So it's a non-biased, third party, whatever. As you've seen surveys go through for board improvement, whatever, who typically analyzes?
In this case, the board. Because you have such a manageable number of statements and a manageable, simple scale, I'm recommending 1 to 5 to start off with. Once you get all the data of how all 9 board members responded to each commitment, and you can see the data, it's not a big analysis challenge. And I also think it sets a good precedent, is instead of having someone else tell us what the data says, we can do that. I don't think that's a heavy lift, and I think most people actually prefer to do it. And as a rule of thumb, the principle that I use is never do for others what they can do for themselves. And this, to me, is pretty straightforward.
So that being said then, that would then fall under the purview of the planning committee to do analysis there. It could go as a board development session separately, not sure and that doesn't have to be determined today. But I can tell you that it's been very, very difficult trying to get an external board development session scheduled. And so we are in March right now. If we take this, would it be April? April is when the board, it would at least be the end of April to the middle to end of May before it's analyzed by the new full board. So taking that into consideration, we meet again in May as a planning committee. So we would have to determine, do we want to do an additional meeting to do that? Is May okay? I don't know if we have to decide that tonight. So what are your thoughts on that regard?
I'll leave that up to you. I'm not gonna be here, so I'm not gonna give my opinion. Well, what I think. No, I'm just kidding.
You can't zoom from Puerto Rico, I mean, what's the?
I won't be in Puerto Rico in May.
No.
So, we do have that month open. I mean, that would be, of course, that's plugging another thing in for people from other committees, but we'd be doing that any month. So that wasn't helpful.
You understand, I go through a lot of this in my own
Yeah,
head, so it is
I know.
helpful because it's letting me, you guys are going through the same thought process that I am.
Yeah.
But again, this isn't Diana says this, Diana says this.
Can I make a suggestion?
No.
You don't know who's gonna be on the committee either.
Correct.
So I don't know if you really wanna set something in gold right now. You know what I mean? You may need to have a,
We can set the plan of it. I understand there won't be a part of it. If the plan is to wait until the next planning committee date to do it, we can do that.
Mhm.
If the plan is we are going to set a board, if the feeling of this group is that the board feels that all 9 members need to be involved in this process, then the plan is we need to have a board. I'm gonna start moving away from the word board retreat. One word that was used a lot at state convention was a board workshop. We would need a board workshop to do something with that. So after the April 1st election, once they're sworn in that first week or two, then it's collecting dates. We're not waiting till May to do that. And how do we get that on the calendar? That's been a little more challenging. That may not be pushing for we're hoping for 100% attendance, but I don't know if we're gonna get 100% attendance, because I can just tell you how difficult it was scheduling between November and April for the superintendent evaluation and things that way. So hopeful, but not holding my breath, just based on experience. So we won't have something set in stone, but we can at least have a plan. Yes, Charity.
2 questions. One, historically speaking, when is the committee reshuffle happen? Does it happen after folks are sworn in April, or does it happen at the May meeting typically?
It would
April.
have to, it would happen after April.
Okay.
Because the board gets seated at that last meeting in April. It's the regular board meeting in April, and
when you do the president
then there'll be orientation.
orientation and the.
Well, actually,
you have to vote
orientation would
for the
happen
president.
before they're seated.
So I'll use Lori as an example. Lori would go to April committee meetings,
Correct.
but not the board
Not
meeting.
the board.
So I think that addresses.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it would make sense for us to then aim for April to do some of the data evaluation, and then we'd have it for our May meeting. And then whomever, and because our meeting is early enough in May that even if the committees were shuffled at the end of May, do we want to wait until essentially June when we have new committee members seated to do that? Or do we kind of progress with the April timeframe and go from there?
And technically, if you do a planning, I would be willing to come and help and come to that committee meeting, since I
In
still can in April.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it's up to us. So as the committee meeting, I'm hearing that, well, let's back up a step. Do we feel that this should be something that is full board workshop or planning committee? And I can tell you what my thoughts are, but I'm gonna listen for your thoughts first. And then I'll let Drew answer after my thoughts. Anybody?
My instincts go to full board, but I could see the logic between having the committee. But I think it's for the board, then why wouldn't you want to include the whole board in that, breaking it apart? I think you can learn a lot when you're breaking even just 5 questions. You may be able to be sitting there and dissecting it as a non-committee member, just, as the board member. But I don't know.
I got the helpful, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I got the
Drew.
helpful, it depends, because in my mind, it depends on how we choose to analyze the data and what those reports look like. Because if we can say in a pie chart, this number of percentage of people said answer 1, this percentage said answer 2, and it's mainly the quantitative, it's one thing. If we do have those verbatim comments and allow people an opportunity to provide comments, we can include the whole list of comments and have that condensed, so that way people have a chance to read it in advance of maybe a full board session. So do we do the work first and then share with the entire board, giving people a chance to ask questions, digest?
Jan?
I think it's a horse apiece, really. I mean,
Greg?
I sort of think the committee should figure it out, I personally. I mean, if we're gonna try to take time out of a regular board meeting for that, I mean, it just makes sense for the committee to do that, come on.
So here then is my thought. My thought is the board evaluation survey falls under the purview of planning. It specifically states board evaluation in that, whatever policy number that it is. We have committees to do this kind of work for that exact reason. And if you all would feel better about me doing like I did at the last meeting, I typically don't like saying, hey, everybody, this is what we're doing at the next meeting, because that's what agendas are for. But I did that for this particular case at the last meeting because, hey, I know that people want to be able to weigh in, and everyone had the opportunity to be here. Now, work or something else might have called them out of that. They all had opportunity to reach out to me as the chair. And didn't, so opportunities are there. I just caution us on doing every full board this. Yes, it is for the full board. So are all of our policies. So are a lot of the things that we do. So it just becomes, at what point do we trust the work of the committee? And remember, that's one of our commitments, is trusting the work of the committee. And I'm a control freak, and so it's hard for me at times to be able to let go of some of that. But I think that this is a great first step, and it is a collective piece of work. And as we start moving toward, I'm going to pick on you for a second, Dan. Dan reached out with questions about a different topic, and his comment as we walked in today is, I'm really starting to try to work at putting some of those questions out prior to, that's another collective commitment of getting information out there ahead of time. So we're kind of starting to walk our walk a little bit as well. So let's put this to a vote for committee members. Keeping this work within the committee, or sorry, Drew, did you want to chime in first?
No, I'll be Dan and talk about a horse apiece,
Okay,
whatever that means.
okay.
But,
It means something, I know.
I think there's arguments for both. I think whatever you decide to do, just give it a shot, see how it works.
Because then we're going to review it in a year.
Yeah.
All right, so committee members, keeping it at committee or full board, I can tell you what I heard. Does anyone, it's sounding like we're keeping it in committee. Has anyone changed their mind or want to change that thought idea? Mr. Horse apiece?
Well, that's why I was a horse apiece, I didn't have an idea.
All right, so we will keep this at the committee level for analysis, at least for the first year. And then, as we revisit after a year, kind of taking a look, where do we go from there? We might like it, or we might be like, whoa, hold the show. We need to fix this, this, and this. That's what I had notes on for mine.
May I actually just ask a question? Please, Drew, in your experience, is there any benefit going to a 6-point Likert scale to kind of have a forced non-center?
Boy, that's a dissertation question, isn't it? I mean, it's so many perspectives on that one.
That's actually an education question, because in schools,
Yeah.
The typical rubric teaching is you don't have a center, a true middle, because our tendency is, if we don't want to choose, if we're a horse apiece, we don't want to choose one or the other, we naturally choose the middle, and this forces us to choose, are we a little better than the middle or on the other side?
Yeah. I don't have an opinion about
Okay.
that.
I was
People
going to ask for a 6.
smarter
or a
than me
4.
on liquors and so on know more about this, but I think you choose whatever you want to do.
Whenever we did like a marketing survey, and marketing courses, they would try to force people to make a decision one way or another.
So 5 gives you that middle ground, you want it, 6
Yeah.
gives you that, you gotta go one side or the other.
Yeah.
Or 4, whatever, yeah,
Slightly agree, slightly disagree.
something to that.
The other question was brought up, I don't know if you decide, do we want to give people an opportunity to share comments about each of the commitments?
Personally, I feel it would help be more constructive if we're looking for opportunities from a board development perspective or something along those lines, if we know why people feel that way. So is it, maybe I might be new, so for me, there are some things on here that I might not have a strong opinion on or know as much about. And so for me, it's the development, mentoring, peer partnerships, kind of thing that would be helpful to me. I don't know, that's where I guess I'm thinking.
I'm gonna use an example from teaching, because I did an end of the year survey every year that I taught, just to see where the kids felt of me as a teacher, how I did, whatever. 1 page, 5 questions. And one of the questions, a student answered, he scored me like a 2 or whatever it was, because I yell a lot. And I'm like, I yell a lot. And his reason, when I looked at, there wasn't a reason under it, but we didn't have air conditioning. And there were 3 fans in the room, one there, and one there up on the wall. And I changed seats every month. And lo and behold, when I think about who he was, because they put their names on it, so I can kind of get a feel, he was always near the fan, and where I taught was near the fan. So I'm projecting my voice to talk over 3 fans, but he happened to be sitting right next to me. So that's, yeah, from his perspective, I was yelling a lot. But it was helpful to know, because otherwise taking that personally, but I'm like, I yell a lot. Man, did I really yell at him? But it just gave me
Explain the why.
the why.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I like that.
I agree, and if people do not want to add a comment, then that's fine too. They just want to do straight numbers, that's okay.
Okay. So we will have those comments with. Anything else that we want to see on this survey? Again, we're shooting for simplicity, keeping it simple the first time around, knowing that we're going to revisit it in a year, looking at what kind of data and feedback it's going to give, and how we're going to analyze it. We're all going to evolve in this process.
I think the only thing that would be interesting to me, maybe and I know it's not adding it to this survey, but with there being a question about the board on, was it the student perception survey? Being able to just include that data, like where people rate the board's effectiveness or whatever that question is, and you all probably know better than I do. Like when we're asking whether it's community or administration or something like that, can we at least keep that alongside this data so that, our board, our self-evaluation is also taking into account some of those things that we're hearing from other data sources as to how our effectiveness is?
Yes and no.
Okay.
No, in the fact it wouldn't be on this evaluation,
Right.
but yes, it would be another data point as we talk about using our data to inform decisions. Exactly, that would be a piece. We would just have to look to see, when does that data come in? It may not be both times that we analyze the data. It might only be at the spring.
Spring.
Okay.
It'd probably be fall by the time.
So we get that, okay. Studer, all right. You good with that?
Yeah, I think you guys make some great decisions. These are, you'll learn a lot, and you'll decide, is this going to provide value to increasing your effectiveness? This is what it's all about. It's a classic continuous improvement kind of thing. So, I think this next year you'll learn a lot. You'll figure out what you want to do differently, what you want to do the same. So, yeah.
Do you have anything else for us?
I do not. This was my objective.
Your main objective today. I know that one of the objectives that I have, and I've talked to Drew briefly on this, I don't believe in surprises. If it was up to me, I'd have something that says no surprise. And I know that other boards do that on the back of their nameplate. We talk about transparency within our community. We should have transparency here as well. And one piece that I've talked to Drew about down the road is, what do these collective commitments then look like at a committee level? This isn't just full board kind of stuff at full board kind of meetings, but as we walk that walk, we walk that at full board meetings, we walk that at committee meetings, we walk that as a committee member and a non-committee member. And so kind of in the back of my mind is, how do we continue to bring this into the folds for us as a board member? Because we're not our board member role isn't reserved to the board meetings on a Monday night at a full board level. So that's just gonna kind of be a piece and that's leading to my question to you. When we are talking about this survey, I don't know if we need something in the directions, clarify this because it's a question I had. Are we evaluating the board's performance at the board level meetings? Or are we evaluating what we perceive as the board's performance as a whole, which is committee meetings, et cetera, et cetera? How does that survey work? We just need to make sure we have that in the directions. I don't know that answer because I haven't looked at enough surveys to see how it's worded.
No. That's an interesting question. My original perception is that people would be thinking about the full board when they are together. When we are together, how well are we following our commitments? Now, I could see that eventually getting into a committee level perspective. And I could also even suggest, not tonight because you have other agenda items, that you might want to think about what commitments, have your committees make commitments to how they're going to work together. So you have some consistency within those committees as well. And it could be, committees could go, yeah, these work for us, right? I mean, we work a little differently. It's like, okay, that's right. But have some consistency among committees.
And a lot of that could come out in the comment section. You know, I mean, if we had a problem with the planning committee, one of us could put that in the comments. You know, I'd like to see us do this. So.
My recommendation is you do it as a full board, you have a couple whacks at it, and then say, all right, let's talk about committee level. How do we want to do that? And you could even explore things like, what about committee leaders? You know, what are the expectations of committee leaders? And so there's some consistency among committees. Or if someone wants to make a case for differentiation of leadership style among committees, then let's have that conversation. So that gets into the no surprises piece, so people know what to expect when the committee meets and so on. Yeah, I'd say give this a shot, give this a couple of rounds, see how effective it is, adjust, so classic plan, do, check, act kind of thing.
So then the next step in the process is to create it. So pretty simple, pretty easy. Is that something you are all entrusting me to do based on the notes here? Is that something you want a subcommittee to do? I mean, it's basically putting 1, 2, 3, 4 after each of those with a set of directions and a comment section. So.
If you're comfortable with it, and then wouldn't mind emailing it out just so that we have a chance to look before it would go live, just in case there's anything that we see.
If I do that, just remember, first time probably for you, comments then have to be responded only to me. Do not respond all, because then we have a walking quorum. So with that, yes, if there's anything within there, and then if Charity says, hey, I don't like this, and it's been brought to my attention, blah, 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 and push out something beyond that. Based on what I see now, I've just described to you what that would look like. I wish that I would have been doing it while Drew was talking, because I could have had it up on the screen as we went. This is what the first time through, it's a little clunky. It's going to be super, super simplistic. It's not going to be super pretty. It might even be a matter of, hey, Lynn, take this, put it into a Google. That's her role, here's what we have. Then it's not necessarily one person transferring the notes from that. And unless I miss something, it's going to be, here's the title, it's a Google survey. Here are the 12 questions. Here's our Likert scale. I don't think if we do numbers, it would be numbers, but they'd be qualified, so there'd probably be words. Do you want them to be creative words? Like, I'm a rock star, I'm Or-
I'm going with Charity, her recommendation.
some, yeah,
Totally agree.
totally disagree. So the traditional that we have, I'm looking at 4, I don't like 5.
If you have Lynn building it and you are the second set of eyes, that's totally fine. I just always know when I work on surveys for just basic spelling stuff, things
Yep.
like that, you know.
You need a second set of eyes.
If you're the second set of eyes, that's fine with me. I don't need to see it, I trust.
And I'm also to the point, remember, it's our first time through it. We know it's not going to be perfect. This is the bare necessities that we have there. But I have no problem sending it out to the board. I just don't know. I think she's gone this week, isn't she? So she'll get back. I don't know how overwhelmed she's going to be. They have a week and then it's spring break, but we also have our board meeting on the 16th, 17th, whatever. It's a week earlier
Patrick's Day.
because of spring break. So it's just the time crunch coming in. So I just want to connect with her before I say, hey, Lynn, I need you to do this because it would need to be pushed out. I think it's by Wednesday. She gets back on Monday. So I don't know if that's a fair turnaround. So let's have Diana do,
I don't wanna speak for Lynn, but she will be overwhelmed. Right, anytime you leave for a week plus, you come back, there's just a lot.
but she's going to need to create, I know I could because it's all anonymous. She's typically the keeper of the stars though. I'll still connect with her. If I have it all built, here, send, go, touch it up, it should be simple.
You can also change the ownership of Google Forms, so if you create it, you can make her the
She can
owner
do
of
it.
it after that.
Alrighty, everything that I have for ideas and conversation, we've hit upon.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Drew before we,
Thank you. Great, yeah, you guys are doing great work. Good stuff.
and then we may be in touch again at a fall workshop type session
Got
or
it.
summer workshop. We'll see what the data tells us.
Yeah.
Awesome, drive safely back.
Okay, got it, thanks. Nice meeting you, Charity. Great seeing you guys here.
All right, second on our,
Next time, food. Yeah, I know.
second on our agenda today, I have new member orientation feedback. And the purpose of this, similar to what we just talked about in the survey, is this was our first time through creating a structure for new member orientation that will be year to year process of it. And so I emailed Charity last week to just, again, I don't believe in surprises. Hey, Charity, I'm gonna put you on the spot during the meeting. Just wanna know what you've got. Was it valuable? What was too long? What was too short? What do you want more of? What do you think less of? Understanding that's one perspective. I remember Dan saying after his, that was just really long, but I could have sat another 2-3 hours with the computer part of it. You know, everybody's got their own flair. We knew going in, we fast forwarded it because we'd have a new board member in March. We also know we're gonna be implementing it again for our new board member or members in April. We'll revisit it again, just that other, hey, additional tweaks, whatever. And then we don't need to keep doing this over and over again. It would just be just maybe the planning chair saying, hey, what did you like? What did you not like? And if there's anything glaring from there. But in a nutshell, anything super high level that either worked really, really well, that you think, hey, you might want to, just because you suggest it right now doesn't mean we're going to change it. It's just, let's put it on our radar. And the next time around, as another data piece, hey, you know, so you got the floor.
Thank you. I think for me, obviously I got my folder up because the collective commitments were in there. I mean, having a takeaway resource, I think was very helpful because it's something that I can consistently go back to, including having the new member handbook. You know, that's not something that I knew that I would be able to get. I'm getting 100 emails from WASB every week, you know, so it's like how much can I look at all of that on a regular basis to where this really kind of condenses specifically for this district, some of the things I need to know. I think sitting down with the administrators that I did get to meet with, Sarah Duncan, understanding a little bit about district finance, it was an incredibly helpful overview, you know, having a conversation with David and Jared, overarching, you know, things that are in here. And then Sarah O was helpful. for me, I would love to, potentially, if we have the opportunity to have a sit down with Jason to understand, his role, or, and Jenny, just understand. I know coming up in the referendum, we're talking about potential impact to HR. Being on the HR committee, I feel like I have at least one meeting's worth of insight from Margaret, but, just understanding, beyond the directory that's available online. And I know that, one of the things that, and this is all new stuff, I think, at least relatively new, frontline for the evaluation is new technology, and probably relatively new to everyone. Being able to have the new members who are coming in get an understanding of that. I had gotten an email regarding whatever the data opportunity is, WiseDash, to understand what our access points are to that. So again, maybe just a brief tech orientation around those programs might be helpful, and maybe that piggybacks with Jason, spending time with you, I'm not sure. But it could be another opportunity, but overall, it was incredibly helpful, because I'm coming in, 10 months, 11 months after people who have been here 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, and I don't want to hold anybody back. So this was really helpful to kind of try to get me up to speed relatively quickly, knowing that there's going to be a learning curve as I keep going. And I've got a lot to continue to learn from everybody here. But this is just very helpful resource.
Awesome. Please.
I think there's a lot of things you may have gotten that a lot of us didn't. So hopefully that'll help you get a good start, or a little bit more accelerator maybe in getting into it. So I'm glad that
I was told by multiple people when I came onto the board, typically it takes 6 to 8 months before you feel comfortable as a board member. They're like, well, Diana, you already know the school system, so you have an advantage where others don't, because you know more of the ins and outs of it. Dan, you know the school system, but at what point did you feel like you kind of felt that you weren't fumbling or, overly swimming in the water?
Well, it wasn't that long ago. I mean, I feel more confident now, but I didn't get to meet with Sarah Duncan or any of that, and that would have been helpful. I still am not sure about how the roles break down between the administrators. And I've asked a couple of times, and Jared has said, we're working on it. So I don't know what that actually means, but I've gone to the wrong administrator and they get me in the right direction. But, it would be helpful to have, this is this person's responsibility. If I have a bus question, who do I go to? That kind of thing. So.
And that's something that he said they are working on as well. Now they're in the new board member handbook, this is in here. I was told, this is our first crack at it, so it'll probably change. But to your point, just to even have something like this, that's a draft version, gives you some insight.
And remember too, when all of the roles in there are shifting a little bit yet because of the whole I'll call it shake up, shake around. So yeah, it's changing, but exactly, I'm a list person, and I'm used to, just like you're used to in the teaching role, here's a list. When you want to go to, you call this person, and you go, and they're, I think, still figuring out, because it used to be this person's role and now it's kind of this, and then, well, that's not really working, so.
And the protocol for visiting the school, what should happen there, contact the principal, what do you do? I mean, walk in anytime, so it'd be good to have all of that. Having town hall meetings, listening sessions, that kind of thing. What, can I just announce one? So we should have something defining that.
So I'm gonna ask this question. I'm not critiquing, I'm asking the question. Of what you just mentioned, on top of the whole list there, are those things that those would be good to have day one as you're sworn in as a new board member? Or do you think that maybe there should be a follow-up? Because as a new teacher, for example, I'm only using teaching because that's where I lived and breathed. You were a newbie technically a newbie follows for the first 3 years. You don't dare try to have 100% of it done on the first day.
Right.
And so I think about how overwhelmed I was. I think about the conversations you and I had in the first couple of months on how overwhelmed you were with the computer, with this. You can have all those conversations. I just don't know how much will stick. So I'm wondering, do we suggest a second go around where maybe at that point then you're meeting the Jason, the Margaret, and having some of those pieces?
Yeah, I think
As
that
a
would be
phase
more helpful,
two.
yeah.
I'm asking,
Well, it'd be like, why would I have a town hall meeting the first month I'm in there? Because people are gonna be asking me questions and I don't know, so call this person, whatever.
If I can comment, I think that would be helpful, like what Charity may need in 6 months may look very different than what I may have needed or been looking, it really just depends on what committees you're on, it depends on, what's happening in the district, so like Wise Dash, I did have to have a sit down for someone to help me through that. That doesn't mean that every board member wants that, but I think that there's always opportunities with the administration to get that one-on-one if you need it. But that may be a good thing to do, Diana, just as hey, a high level, what are some things that you find now in 6 months that you're still missing or that you still think you need some clarification on now that you kind of got your foot in the door?
let me noodle on that.
Yeah.
I
don't know
like
what that
where you're
looks like,
going
but I
with
think
it,
it's a-
but I know that if I was to ask, what are you missing? You don't know what you don't know.
No, right.
But if we can maybe, I hate being surveyed, but
I was
Like,
thinking the same thing.
you hate being surveyed, but
No.
one thing that I did with Dan, as the chair of this committee, I reached out to Dan every 2 to 3 months. I did that purposefully.
Mhm.
Hey, what are you doing? How are you feeling? What do you need? We didn't have a mentor role yet. I'm sure Dan connected with other board members as well, but as the chair, I can take care of my peeps.
Mhm.
And so, hey, well, I was wondering this, and then he would, hey, I'm not understanding that. So they're developed that, and I think you've got some of it. It didn't help with some of the others, but who do you talk to here? Hey, reach out to this person, go this route. Hey, we have a protocol for this. Those are snippets of conversations he and I had that if you were to say to Dan in the 3rd month here, hey, what do you need? I can tell you Dan's response would have been, I don't know. I'm just trying to stay alive right now. Correct me if I'm wrong,
No,
but
you're
that would
right,
have
you're right.
been. So I agree, Lori, that something, what does that look like? Is it a conversation? Is it a,
Like 2 to 3 question, like you said, a 2 to 3 question, that's not a full-on survey, but just what are you feeling confident in? Because there are certain things that you feel you pick up right away, you really gravitate toward. What are some things that, you still feel you're struggling with, and it could just be understanding Robert's Rules of Order, point of clarification, all of those things. I mean, until you get into that flow of meetings and know what the culture of each meeting is, you might not know, but at least here's my question.
and with this, by adding in, and that was a conversation that Dan and I had, which is why we suggested having the mentor in part of the orientation. That could be something, and we said that mentor isn't a assigned mentor, it's the committee chair will meet, whatever it is, says with it, with new members of their committee. And so they can reach out and ask those questions. Hey, how are you doing? Is there anything you're struggling with? What's going well? Anything I can help you with? And hopefully, Dan, you're on 2 committees, right? So you, being new, you would have 2 people reaching out to you. Charity, you're on 2 committees, you'd have 2 people reaching out to you. And so if you don't get it with the first one, then it might be, maybe you're on policy with Craig and, oh, Craig, can you help me with this, kind of a thing. So you've got yourself covered in multiple directions, as opposed to just, here's a generic survey that comes to my inbox that I'm overtly inundated with emails anyway. Should I use that as the suggestion through the chairs? If the chairs have set check-in questions, kind of thing, you can deviate from them, but these are things just checking in on your new members. And these are a couple of things. And I've recorded, what am I confident in? What am I still struggling with?
What are some questions you have? It could just be general questions. I guess I would yield to you and Craig as chairs, because I could say, yeah, that sounds great, but I'm not a chair who has to follow up with somebody regularly. And so it's easy for me to say, yeah,
Do that.
but are you comfortable with that?
All right, so I'm not gonna put this as a questionnaire. I'm gonna use this as follow-up questions from chair to newbie in the mentor role. Did I capture that? It won't be stated exactly like that in the minutes, right? We're not gonna say newbie, but that's kind of the gist where that's at. All right, anything else on that? All right, moving right along. Next one is the superintendent evaluation feedback. As you recall, we met with Tim Kacher and he led us through the superintendent evaluation process. I'm gonna tell you, Jared got to me his goals yesterday, the day before, whatever it was, and there was a piece missing. My thought was that these goals, when he puts them in there, they're live. When they go in there and I finalize them, whatever, they're locked in. So it's not necessarily a live document. You see that point. You don't see things until I finalize whatever's there. So that's why there's still nothing there at this point. The piece that wasn't there, and I have to look more intricately, but the first thing I noticed in that was, hey, we had talked about some things with discipline, being a focal point. What are some action steps regarding discipline? So I need you to put some of those in there. It's been a busy couple days on my end once he got those. He's been very, very busy. I'm not making excuses, but with the referendum and all those other things, he's talked to us about the overarching goals. And I said to him, if these aren't in there in a perfect format, we know what the goals are, we've heard them. I would much rather him dedicate the majority of his time right now to the referendum than to having this perfect round of goals. Please correct me if I'm wrong and I should be addressing it otherwise. We got behind the 8 ball in it. We were late coming through.
Wasn't it left that he and Jenny were gonna meet and talk about it?
About what?
Discipline.
The goals are, he's got to talk about what are some action steps with
Okay.
it that they're going to do. And so I don't want to speak on his behalf right now, but I am going to speak somewhat on the behalf. There's been a lot going down with the referendum,
Sure.
and pieces that way, a lot going down with pushing different things through with Neil. There's always going to be things with the district. I'm going to say referendum right now has taken a lot of the priority pieces. Yet this still is a priority as well. So how do we find that balance? So I will continue to nudge, but I didn't hold him, hey, this needs to be finalized before the planning meeting, so we have this. To me, that wasn't a necessity.
I guess, April is just, 27 days away, April 1st. And you're not gonna implement a new discipline policy in May, you know what I mean?
It's not.
Gonna come next fall if any time, so.
But that's not necessarily implementing new action steps, could be things that he's already doing. It's just laying
Sure.
out for us
Okay.
what's happening.
Okay,
This isn't, hey, we're changing, you're mid-year. So if you're making an overhaul in discipline, you don't do that mid-year anyway.
right,
You know what I'm saying?
right,
But different action steps to how we're going to see things.
okay,
I know that Sarah O has been doing some different things with discipline. So some of those would be pieced in there. I can't speak specifics because I don't have that in front of me right now. But I just want to let you know as far as where that's at, that it's going to be finalized. You're going to see a snapshot of the goals and things. You're not going to see it again until check-in number 1, when different things have been added. My understanding initially when I brought this to committee months and months and months ago was it's a live document throughout. I've been corrected on it. It's not a live document. It's live for Jared, but my understanding is once it's finalized, it becomes live for others to see. Okay.
Help me understand, like, what's the definition of a goal? Because, in this particular case, it seems as though we have identified an area of focus, right? And then we're turning to the superintendent or administration, come up with some sort of a plan. I mean, at what point does the board provide the direction for that area of focus that the board has identified?
So my understanding, and that conversation kind of came up when Tim was here.
Yeah.
That the way the DAPES process works, it is more focused on the superintendent and their goals. That we, through the check-in process, we have our comments that go through.
Okay,
But basically and that would be a great question when Tim comes, because Tim's gonna, you were here for that. That he's gonna guide us through this process this year. Tim's gonna lead us through check-in 1. I will, or whoever the planning, I will, because I'll still be here, just having the background on it. I will lead us through check-in 2. And then our summative evaluation, Tim will lead us through. So I don't have all of the answers. I'm learning it just as you are, but I had asked that question that did come up through when we met, and that is, it is, the DAPES process is not an evaluation process like many of us think evaluation.
okay.
We think of evaluation, when I think of evaluation, I think 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5 is good, 1 is bad, you need improvement on this. There's different protocol if there are, targets for improvement, there's a word for it, I just lost it. The DAPES process is different because, yes, it's performance-based, but it's looking at improvement, it's not improvement. How do you describe even the way CISA works with
Growth.
educator effectiveness? Yeah, they're focusing on growth. It's not a punitive kind of a piece. So if we're looking for something more evaluative other than growth mindset focused, we need a different tool. And when I had gone to the state convention, looking at even the school perceptions tool, because it's light years behind where it is, it wouldn't be feasible for us. Is there a different tool if that's something that we're looking for? But as a committee, we had committed to going through this process, at least for this year, to see, given what's there, and that's why I said asking us all, have an open mind, given what's there, is this something that we see working for us? And it's hard because many of us come from a frame of mind where we're more evaluative in nature. It's still your.
Yeah, so I guess I was confused by that because when I hear we talk about goals, I'm thinking measurables like metrics that okay, we're hoping to move the needle this much in this particular area.
So you will have that. All of Jared's goals are written in the SMART goal format. SMART standing for specific, measurable, attainable, time-bound, and I forgot the R.
It's realistic.
Realistic. R comes before T in SMART. So with that, when I sat down with him, we made sure they were all in SMART goal format before they were presented here. So they all have measurable components to them.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I think that answers it. So.
Okay, Lori?
I was gonna add to it, but I think you guys kind of put it all together. I had like a thought, but it all put together, so I don't need to repeat it.
Anybody else? Alrighty, then moving right along, the next up, Jason is going to, we have parent engagement survey and board referendum letter, both of those. Do you have a preference which comes before the other?
No, I think we can go in order, just
All right.
parent engagement, I think it's first. So, thank you. I always like to start with our why. And so when we think of a parent engagement survey, we know that parent engagement and feedback is important, and we value that. So that's the essential why. A parent engagement survey also aligns with past practice. And so just a reminder that in the past, we just like our student engagement survey, we partnered with Studer. That partnership is sunset, so we're looking for a replacement. And of course, that our parent engagement survey and the data aligns with components of our strategic plan. And so those are the 3 whys that I thought about. I also think about the how. So I think it's important to note that any data that comes from a parent engagement survey is reviewed by the director team, the district level team, but it's also funneled to building leaders in their leadership teams by school. And so the data sets would be dissected there and becomes part of their action plans. Typically what happens is we would work with school perceptions to send this parent engagement survey out electronically. In past, I've also made sure that we had paper copies available at each building, if that was the preferred method for families, and we communicate that. And in past, what I have done is align the parent engagement survey window with the student engagement window. So parents and students just assume that well, that's when we will look for our survey. And that's worked well for me in the past. Just a couple reminders, and I would love your feedback. One is that we can certainly make minor revisions, right? But our survey experts, our creators of surveys, have asked us to really steer clear of wordsmithing individual questions, right? And so we can delete questions, we can make revisions to like demographics, those are minor things, but they really have asked us not to wordsmith. I'd really, ideally, we work on questions here about this survey, work through the process, and if we're supportive, we would then bring this to the full board, preferably in March, and then work towards finalizing our window. We have not finalized our window for using this, but really would like, any questions, suggestions for improvement, and the work to occur here so we can be ready for the full board. That's a question, please.
Good question.
Yeah.
Is this going to be, I'm trying to remember in the past, but for a parent that has multiple children in different buildings, they gonna do the survey for each building? I think that's how it was in the past. I just didn't know if that was what is gonna happen now.
That's not the way I read this,
Right, which,
because the way this one works is if we're on slide 3, page 3, which schools does your child attend? Select all that apply.
right,
What grades? Select all that apply.
Right.
So in the past, we did one per child per
Right.
school.
right. And I just am wondering, it would concern me if we are only doing one survey for multiple children.
What I've worked with school perceptions in the past is once they get to that question, then you get multiples. And so if you have a child at the middle school ensures, then you're really answering two sets of
So it's
questions.
branching.
Okay.
Yeah. So similar to what we've had in the past.
Okay,
Yep.
I just wanted to be sure, because when you're looking at.
It's just hard to capture the branching in a PDF, so.
Right.
No, and that's good, because that was one of my
a great
questions with
question.
school experience at the elementary school. If I have an elementary and high school
Right,
kid,
it's
those
gonna
are very
mess up the-
different, and it's going to skew the data, so we are on
We
the
want to make
same.
sure we're getting the data for the
Yep.
right building level.
Good.
That was one. The only other question I do have is, and I know we did this for the student, I do still wonder the Latinx,
Page 3.
page 3 for the identity. And I know we put the student one through, we weren't gonna change it. I'm just still not sure if that is being, my concern with it is that it's not being fully, what's the word I wanna try to find? I've done a little bit more research. I'm finding that especially older Hispanics don't even know what that is, or Latinos, or Latinas. So I want to be sure that we're not missing a group of somebody that, may identify as Latino or Latina. I'm not even so much worried that if we have, I'm not even sure how you say it, I don't want to say it incorrectly, Latinx, Latinx,
I don't
I
even
think it's
Latinx.
Latinx.
But I know that, I have a couple friends that I've asked also, so I just want clarity on, I think we do need some clarity on the reasoning behind that, and if we're not missing someone who may not know, especially when they are fluent in a Spanish, my understanding is that is not a Spanish version, that is more of an American, and I can appreciate the reason why. I'm not saying that it's necessarily wrong, I just don't want to I want to make sure we're not missing a Latino or a Latina that wouldn't necessarily be.
Sure.
Well, and I look at, not picking on
Latinx.
Puerto Ricans, I've had friends that are Puerto Rican, and if they're Puerto Rican, they don't want to be called Hispanic, and they don't want,
Right.
they're very proud of their culture. Instead of Latinx, is it Latin American? Can we just, I don't know, but that doesn't fit the grammatical, but neither does Latinx.
Right.
I guess my curiosity would be, we know what our makeup of our community is. Why is it so essential for us to know this identifying information on a satisfaction survey?
That is something, you know, like I said earlier, that the demographics is a spot where we have full control over, right? School perceptions, again, would just tell us, please don't wordsmith survey questions. So that we can do away with demographics. We can say, take Latinx off. We can, that's very flexible. Far more flexible than our creators would say around the survey questions.
I realize that we can remove it. I just wanna know what the value is.
I can tell you my perceived value.
Sure.
Going through, if we look at some of the questions of, my child feels safe at school, or the staff treat my child with dignity and respect. Having a demographic breakdown, if you're seeing a tendency that, hey, this demographic is scoring this pretty low at this particular school. Without that demographic breakdown, you have no idea. So when we break down demographics for behaviors, we break down demographics for special ed, we break down demographics for different academic things to make sure I don't see why we wouldn't do that in this. That doesn't mean that this has to be the be all end all, but just if you have it there and you don't use it, it's easier than not having it there and wanting it.
But ultimately, we would wanna strive to treat all of our students with
Correct.
dignity and respect. And it shouldn't matter.
We're gonna strive to do it, but what does the data tell us? And if we're making data-informed decisions, then we have data to support that. That's just my perspective on where that is, yeah.
Jason, I don't know, and I know this is our first, we've used, is this who does our staff?
Yeah.
Okay, so we know how they break down. They do a very pretty detailed. Could that be a question that needs to be asked if that is part of the data when they do their, what's the word I'm looking for? When they do an analogy of the data, are they actually pinpointing, well, that, do they give you that much distinct data about the identity in the, in the whole thing?
The answer-
I can't talk tonight.
No, you're good. The answer is yes.
Thank
right?
you.
If we ask the question, then you can
gonna be
dissect
part
the
of that.
data, cross-reference it, right? So if you don't ask, as Diana's saying, if you don't ask, you would get this not raw data, you would get this data, but if anyone ever wanted to say, my child feels safe at school, I would like to see that by the identity breakdown, you would not be able to. So all it does is allow for us to do that. And yes, so the short answer is yes, you can.
Dan?
I want to read this research that a community member sent to me. It says, Latinx isn't a race, it's a queer gender term for someone who is neither female nor male. To be race, it would be Latino. Male or female would be Latina or Latino. Latinx is crossing out the O or the A in order to stamp out male and female. Queer theory. I think we just take it out.
You can't take it out because Hispanic and Latin American, if you break, because these are the Spanish speakers. So
Latin or Latino
if you're Latino / A,
Latina.
if you go back to that, would be
Latine with an E
and like,
is equally inclusive, and I know that can be a charged word. It's more of, I've heard the argument before that there's not a sound for the X in Spanish-speaking countries.
Right.
Where with the E in place of it, there is. And so essentially that is intended to be, rather than putting Latino / Latina / that the Latina with an E, is intended to essentially tick both the boxes.
Well, what's covered under Spanish origin of any race? Isn't that sort of all-inclusive?
Yeah, we have to remember that folks are self-selecting, right?
Mhm.
And so we're really saying, do you see your self-identity as one of these? Right, so we're not pre-populating it. Folks are self-selecting, and that level of detail, I don't think we would ever know.
So my question is similar to Dan's, and this is the almost English teacher in me. We have Hispanic, we have Spanish. Latino, Latina is the Spanish written version of Latin American. The other two are in English. Why is that one not in English? Why don't we have Latin American? That's just, and by having Latin American, it solves all of this. If Latin American is truly what they're, I don't know if I'm missing a boat on something, but
I mean, I'm not Latina, so I don't wanna speak for a Latino or Latina, but from what I was told, that it is not it's not even so much necessarily, like, I can appreciate the idea that we're not making it Latino, because that's male, right? We don't wanna offend a woman who may be a Latina. But where my concern is there's going to be a misunderstanding for someone who is not familiar with the X. I don't want them to be,
Agreed.
so I don't know is Latin America
So I
the
just,
proper, because really what it comes down to is it's who identifies at that.
I just did the brief Google search. Now I'm 20 some years out of my Spanish speaking
Mhm.
degree and everything with that. What does Latina mean? A woman or girl who is native or inhabitant of Latin America. So that goes back to my statement. We have an English thing in there, Hispanic. We have an English thing in there of, what, Spanish? I don't have it in front of me, sorry.
Hispanic.
Hispanic, and what's the other one?
Spanish origin.
Spanish origin, those are both English. And then we have Latinx. So let's just make it Latin American. Then it's all three that's what they're from Latin America. It's a Latin American person. It's a Spanish person. It's a
Mhm.
The only challenge, and it's not to truly challenge, because we can belabor this probably for a long time, is that sometimes Latino is inclusive of Caribbean countries and Latin America.
Yeah, that's where I was wondering if the American.
That to say Latin America would solve for, I think, the majority of what the challenge would be to that demographic checkbox.
Are the Caribbeans part of the Americas?
Depends on the countries.
I'm looking at right now, I was doing that right as you were talking, because I'm on that same line. Yes, the Caribbean islands are generally considered part of Latin America, as the term Latin America includes not only South America, but also Central America, Mexico, and the Caribbean islands where Romance languages like Spanish are predominantly spoken. Latin America.
What does our, like, hold on.
In the Jamaica would be, the Americas also, right?
Then it says terminology, when discussing the region as a whole, it's often referred to as Latin America and the Caribbean.
Okay.
And down at the bottom, it says other. I mean, they can write in whatever they want.
Right, so if we put
Yeah.
Latin America
And they're like, no.
and we have another, if they don't feel,
Yeah.
for the, and I don't want to say for the 1%, but for the less than 1% that we have, at least that's why we have an other there, to make sure nobody is excluded or feels
Right.
excluded. So are we in consensus with the committee that Latinx, Jason will look into to see if we can change that to Latin American? And I'm going to step out of the box here as the committee chair and ask that if that is, and you guys agree with me or disagree, if it is okay to do that on this, can we do it so it's similar for the other surveys as well? So that's consistent, that if that can be changed to Latin American on the parent survey, it will also be changed on the student survey and the staff survey. Are you all
Good point.
okay with that?
100%.
Craig, input?
I think it's a great idea, but I still question, especially, I still question whether or not, that identifying a child by their ethnicity is necessary on a satisfaction survey.
Can I ask you to hold that question for when the information is brought back to us and we have the representative here to speak to that? Say, hey, this is a question here. Can you describe for me
Sure.
a few instances on how this is used?
Yeah.
And then we can make given the data in front of us,
Right.
then hearing from the person, behind it all, would that be a fair piece? Rather than us to try to bullet why we think in this things, but actually have it, they can tell us specifically then, would that be okay? I'm not discounting the question, just when there's someone here that can answer it better.
Sure, I guess,
I-
I mean, my hope is that we're able to take every child's concern in this, in a similar,
Correct, and if they say, hey, there's really no value to it, then that would be a great time to say, all right, then I would recommend that the committee takes a look at this next time and eliminates it. Or, oh, I see value, I see why it's there, we're gonna leave it.
Sure.
But it's easier to, from where we are now, having it on until we hear that there's little value and then take it off,
Sure.
since we don't have that information today.
Just a point of clarification, I know, I don't know, have we covered the student one already? I know this is about the parent one, and I know we're talking about consistency across all of them. But did we talk about that one in a prior meeting?
Yes,
Okay.
But I think, from my understanding is, we've approved a survey. We didn't necessarily approve, the language on the survey can still be changed. That was my understanding.
I'm gonna push back.
But,
And,
I mean,
but I'm gonna ask the question that, no, but if the language is changed, what's the process to do that?
I don't know, this.
Do you know what I'm saying? Because
This is what I
then,
got from Jared.
oh,
Yeah,
it can
because
still
there
be
was
changed.
question at the
Right.
meeting about it.
But my question just would be, what would be the process to do that? Does that come back, okay, if question number 4, the language is changing,
Right.
is the expectation it's coming back to committee, then coming back to the board before it's implemented, even the board said yes, or?
No, I would think that the planning committee would be the one that can adapt the survey according to what the committees,
But it would have to come back to the committee, and that's what I'm saying, given timeline, we are at March, we don't meet again until May. So for this go around, we need to, that survey is the one that's gonna be used. There's not gonna be a lot of change, because we don't have time to come back to committee to push the survey out. Does that make sense?
Oh, well, that's unfortunate.
That's just my thought, correct, unless I just don't know if
I
we
would
come.
seek some clarification on that one.
Yeah, I think we do too, because I don't know, Jason, if you spoke to them since we approved the student? Because at the board meeting when this topic came up, we were told we couldn't change the words. Now why we are kind of, you know what I mean? So I think we need some clarity on what this is gonna look like.
I can give you some clarity. What questions might you have?
Well, the same topic, the one with
The Latinx.
the Latinx,
Oh.
that's on the
Yeah.
student that has been approved. What would be the process to get that so that it does have the same language as the parent?
So I just emailed Derek, I think he joined us, and just told Derek, I'm just pointing because he was virtual, sorry. Derek from School Perceptions was here and answered the question. I simply emailed him and said that the student engagement survey moved through the full board with support, that we would have the parent engagement survey on tonight with the goal of it being on the March full board, and we set a time to meet, I think, in April. So there's time. But specifically about demographics, I wrote here, in red is to do. JB will check with School Perceptions, changing Latinx to Latin American in both the student and parent. That change, I'm very comfortable that I can say, yes, we can do that. Questions, survey questions is a far different
Okay.
answer.
That's what, I was interpreting, you were saying
No.
survey questions.
Okay.
Were you just talking about the?
Well, that, but, I was under the impression that some of the other items could still be changed, but
Student or parent?
the student.
I mean, we can change anything, right? It hasn't been, but I think that we'd have to think about going,
Right.
we have a full board resolution that was approved.
Let's put it this way. If the only sticking point is that, it's a non-issue, right?
Well, my question would be, if we've already proved that as a board, why are we going back to making additional changes to questions? Because it's already been approved as a board.
It can be a practice to retroactively change things of a previously
Doesn't have to
approved
wait a year.
motion.
No, and I understand that, but to approve something to go back and make changes to something that we haven't utilized, I guess, I don't know, we have a collective commitment that says, that we're going to, I remember how it's worded, honoring the board decision, kind of a piece in there. I just wonder on that, we just want to be a little cautious and careful, because otherwise, we don't want to come back to saying that, okay, we made a decision on the board, but just because it's a decision on the board, we could bring that decision back again month after month after, so we just want to be careful in our practice.
I did have something to add.
Yes.
One thing, when we're talking about with specifically the parent, this is asking the identity of the parent,
Yes,
not the student.
That is,
So I just want to be sure that we're not thinking we're gonna know what the identity is of these students that we're concerned about, because if a parent identifies, they could have an adopted child, they could have, there's many, we all know how this works. So I'm just saying,
It's a good
I don't
reminder.
want us to think that. So on your note, Craig, how important is it to know the parent's identity? Would we be better served to know what their student's identity was? If that's what we're, if that's kind of where we're.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I understand that question. Do you understand what she's asking?
yes. I understand
So what
the
are we
question,
gonna do with it?
Right,
Because it's a valid, I agree with the question. Dan agrees with that question.
To me, that would be more valuable, since we're wanting to know how, like example, unless there's another example where it would be important to know the parent's identity, I'd be curious, I'm not saying that it's not an interest, but do we need both then? I don't know.
I'm curious on both accounts, but I mean, I wanna know what the rationale is. And that's just my 2 cents.
Well, I think that there are questions on the parent survey that I feel welcome in my child's school, that it might be helpful to know.
Sure.
In the same way that like with students, I have at least one school staff member I feel comfortable contacting when I have any idea of concern, maybe less so. I mean, that is not specifically demographically connected, but I think there are probably 2 or 3, the school teachers with materials that reflect my family's cultural and racial backgrounds. You could argue that question, but it would be helpful to have the demographics as it relates specifically to that question.
Yeah, and here's the thing, well, going back to how that information is used, are we going to be profiling families just to try to fit this particular, survey, to match the survey up to try to serve that particular segment of the population?
Well, I'm gonna use that to move this conversation, that point, because of the question or conversation that Dan and I had via email today is, how is this survey going to be used? Because to take a survey for survey's sake is a waste of everybody's time. So when we look at whether we're talking the student survey, the parent survey, student survey more so, but parent survey, can you give a 30-second or minute overview? How is this data in the past been used? Now, we've used this, is this a new company we're going with this year?
school perception.
So it would be a little bit different than the Studer questions that we've had in the past. So there might be a little bit of difference there, but just a brief synopsis. How do we use the parent engagement survey? I don't ever remember seeing a parent engagement
Never have.
survey. And that's why I have begged the question each time, is this the right place for this in the planning committee? If not, what committee does it go to? I don't have that answer, but I've never seen it here. So until we know, or until I understand how is the data used, I understand it fits under our strategic plan, and that's kind of how it fits here in a way. But is there a better house for it in committee? Obviously not policy and obviously not fiscal, but is there a better place for it to take a look at that information? And this isn't the first time Jared's heard, or Jason's heard me say this. Every time we meet once a month, I come back to the same question: is this the right place for it? But how is it used? And then that'll help determine, yes, this is the right home or not. And what are we gonna do with it?
Sure. I can attempt to answer all the questions. I think Craig's question first is how we use the data, is that we disaggregate data in every way possible, right? From our report card data, right? That's given to us in a way that is broken down by subgroups. And we model that with every piece of data we have, whether it's behavioral, whether it's more local assessment data, we break it down in a similar way, and this would allow us to match that or follow that. I would also say that similar to what Drew was talking about, is that it's a progression of, I think we're on a data-informed journey, right? And how we use the data now will look differently over time, right? And so that's just something to think about. The plan, whether this is the right place, I asked that question in a central office meeting with all the directors and Dr. Burke, and it was unanimous, bring it to planning committee. So that's why it's here, right? That's logistically just why it's here. And then how more specifically we use this data, I would start at the building level. So we've created a model, we call it the action plan model. And so there's an expectation for principals to work with their leadership teams every summer. And they look at a multitude of data sets. They look at student engagement, parent engagement, staff engagement, academic data, behavior data. And Chris Malloy and I have created a template where they capture that data longitudinally. And from that data digging, they create goals for their buildings. They create 6 goals. 3 student goals, 1 in math, 1 in literacy, 1 in student engagement, and then 3 adult goals, or 1 around math, literacy, engagement. So if we say we want to grow students around math, how are we going to support the adults to do things in math? And so that's where this falls at the building level, is summer data digging, which then evolves into action plans and goals for their buildings. From a district level, the director team, I think, is in a different spot. We're on that continuum of our data journey as well, right? So we are growing in how we use this data. But what I would say is that we see how Margaret brings staff engagement survey data forward, and what are the actions that come from that is similar to the goal of where we want to get with directors with student and parent.
What is the makeup of the leadership team and how are they chosen?
Yeah, that's different by every building. It's made up, I don't know how they're chosen, to be really honest. But like the high school I'm more intimate with, so there are team leaders, I think representative of every content area. And that's the core of it, but then I think they add folks because we've allocated dollars to make that happen.
So are there any parents on the leadership team?
That's a great question. I don't believe thus far.
Yeah.
I have written a blurb to our principals. They haven't seen it yet, to prime them for their data meetings. And what I've encouraged them is to think about adding students, especially at the secondary level, and parents. And I think they're just they need to be part of the process. I think it's a little more challenging at the elementary to have a 3rd grade student there, right? Mm-hmm. But to have a 5th grade student might be appropriate, but middle and high school, I think, is very appropriate. And I'm encouraging that. But they're on a journey as well, right? We're all learning and growing together.
So a follow-up on that, Jason,
Yes.
Do you see, obviously this is new, I know we've done the staff survey for many years now. I think we're on 3rd year of this specific survey, because I think Diane and I, right when we came on, changed the survey. So Do you see this coming to the board with the same type of breakdown of what the survey results show, like they do at HR?
Yeah, I think we would be remiss not to bring some data to you. Yeah. In past practice in other districts, I have some knowledge because I've worked with these.
Mhm.
And we brought the data to, curriculum committee there, that's where it just funneled to, but yes, that's my past practice.
Because I know like the student data, we've talked before, we haven't seen that.
Yep.
in 2
And
years.
that's, we brought it to Ed Services, but I think we need to create a cadence for that.
And that's what I just put on the note here to get into the cadence of,
Yeah.
and you and I will talk afterwards, when is a good time, once we figure out
Yep.
the month to do it, and then.
What typically happens is, what I've done in the past, again, just past practice, doesn't have to be the practice, is that I align the student and parent engagement survey usually about the third week of April to the first week of May as the window. And it takes some time for school perception to put the data together. We take a look at the data, we're ready to bring it to a committee in June or July. That's typically what I've found to be true.
Point of information,
Please.
just given the large ESL program we have at Schurz, has there been any conversation about offering it in Spanish?
Yeah, we'll have a Spanish, I should have mentioned that, but yes,
Okay.
absolutely, thank you.
Do you know how many questions were on the old parent?
Not off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
I feel like it was pretty short.
Yeah.
I'm remembering. I just
don't remember.
want to be sure that, not.
So that leads me to a question, thank you. And that is, so we went from the old survey to this new survey. What questions are similar? What questions are different? Who kind of made that decision? I'm not questioning the person that made it, but questions that were left off. Yes, I trust the administration is doing what they're doing, but why were they left off? If they were valuable before, or maybe they weren't valuable before, I guess, can we speak a little bit to the process there?
Sure, as I've mentioned, our work with Studer sunsetted for a number of reasons. And they were the owners of that previous survey. And so we really didn't do much with surveys that, we just let that sunset. And through conversations at the director level and aligning of the work, school perceptions could provide us with multiple surveys. I engaged with school perceptions and what if, right? What could these surveys look like for our district?
Okay, let me stop you to rephrase, because maybe I didn't ask it clearly. If we've had parent surveys in the past and we've asked questions A, B, C, and D, and if I'm looking at something more longitudinal, now I know that we're not gonna have it from school perceptions to Studer, but we can at least say that question A is similar to, we can at least
Benchmark.
meticulously look at a longitudinal thing, even though that's sunsetted, that's moved on, we're starting new. Do we have, I'm rephrasing my question, do we have access, or do we have the ability to access that to look back if we need to?
Yes.
Okay. Craig, you were waiting patiently.
I guess it goes back to some of the comments I made earlier, about, identity and stuff like that. And I could potentially see usefulness in some of the areas of the survey that I'm noticing, like, how would you like to receive your information and, communication and stuff like that. Some of, just in case there's a blind spot in a particular segment of our community where we're missing, that type of communication or, satisfaction, that sort of thing. So I guess that's what I was hoping to hear, but yeah.
So I took that, I'm gonna piggyback on that, if I
Yeah.
may. I'm on slide 6 from the parent survey, questions 3 and 5, for example.
Okay.
The overall amount of homework my child is asked to complete is whatever. As someone who's studied Spanish and going and spending time in Spanish-speaking countries, 100% in Spanish, what I could have done in English, it took 4 times as long because the brain is processing so much. So if this particular person says it's too much and at least now you have the background to see, hey, there's something else going on because this demographic, maybe they need some ELL services that they're not receiving, maybe they're whatever. The
Sure.
same is true with my child has access reliable to the internet outside of school. If we notice that there's a certain demographic that's kind of coagulated in this area that we can help meet, and this can help make sure that people are treated fairly equally, whatever that is.
He's getting the service that
They should have,
Right.
right? If this can help to provide us that, then perfect. So I agree, it shouldn't be done in a negative way. And what you're looking, the negative, I'm looking at it from the positive,
Well,
these
I'm
are all
not- I'm
positive.
not looking at it one way or another, I just wanna know what the rationale is.
Correct, and making sure that it's not, you used the word profiling before and whatever. We wanna make sure that we're not doing that, but how do we make sure that our
Right.
kids have what they need?
Right.
Dan, you started,
No.
all right. Anything else regarding the survey? Anything else as we go to push this forward? I'm gonna speak out, I'm in line but out of line, I'm prefacing it to start with, okay? I was taken aback at our last board meeting, when we have, and I'm not asking anyone to talk about how they voted, but when we get to a board level and we have a vote, and we have multiple no votes coming from committee level, but we don't have committee discussion based on that, it makes me wonder, what did we not do at this level? And that's why I'm asking this, because we don't want to get to a full board and then be like, well, wait a second. We've got 3 members of the committee, they voted, I'm making this up right now, okay. We've got 3 members of the committee that are voting no on something. Why did it even get pushed to the full board level if 3 committee members said no to that? So I just want to make sure we're having the discussion here. So when we get to the board level, if we're pushing it up there, we're saying that we support this.
Not necessarily. We're supporting it being voted by a full board. So I mean, I get what you're saying, but I don't think that necessarily means that I could support it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that.
I understand that. I understand that, because we
Yeah, so I
don't give
wanna
them, no,
get
no,
that-
but I would know going in, based on conversation at this level, if you were a yes.
So are
or
you
if
asking
you-
me why I voted the
No,
way I voted?
not at
'Cause
all.
I feel like that's what's
Not at all.
happening now.
No, I'm simply asking the question, have we exhausted everything here in the discussion that we need to say we support pushing this forward for the full board? Because if we're saying we support this to move forward so we can go on with it, I don't think we ever push something forward to the board to vote no.
But that
And
may
maybe
not have been the intention. I
What do you
never-
mean?
When I was part of the planning and it wasn't my intention to push it to the board to vote no.
No, I'm
Because
just,
sometimes the board is gonna see, we're gonna have further discussion.
I
at the board
understand
level.
that. I just want I'm coming back to the premise that I just want to make sure that if we have questions or concerns going forward,
Mhm.
we've exhausted those here, so we give Jason the time to present those, so we have something good moving forward that we can stand behind. And if we have things that we don't feel we can stand behind, that we state that here, so he can work on it to get that there. That's my only piece.
Right.
That I was surprised when there was dissenting votes, because like, well, we didn't have action, we didn't have
Because
conversation
there's no information.
that would have said in there. So again, I'm not critiquing one way or the other. I just want to make sure as we go, because our timeline, again, if we want to adhere to Jason's timeline to get this out in April, then we need board approval in March. And if we have things that we don't think are going to, then this is the time we want to get that done. So we put the best document forward. That's all I'm getting at right now is, have we made the sausage we need to make?
Right, well,
to
do
push
we
it
have
forward?
all the sausage we need to make regarding the identity?
He's pushing that forward, my understanding, to see, are you saying the Latinx?
Yeah, well, I know that I know Craig isn't on the committee, but he is on the board, and I know there was do you still have questions
No,
regarding?
If-
I'm not, I just wanted to be sure
if the rationale is,
to try to,
you
We
know,
thought that too.
try to, find blind spots in segments of our community that we may not be serving, appropriately. I get that rationale. As far as, your committee voting a particular way at the board, we hope that there is, good faith effort from the committee to voice their concerns prior to it coming to the board, and that they're, to your point, and, but sometimes I can see where discussions come up at the board level that, weren't necessarily thought of at the time.
Totally get it.
And me personally, I probably would have voted differently if I knew what that represented differently. So, I think that the recommendation from the committee so far is that, we're going to change it to Latin American. I think that's a nice compromise to what would be suitable. I get that.
I just want to read it. I'm not asking how people vote. I just want to make sure for this moving forward, we have all of the questions answered. We know that there's going to be additional things that come up in that, but do we all feel, because I shouldn't have to ask it each, I just want to make sure because of our tight timeline with this, wanting to put that out in April, we want to make sure, because we don't meet again until May. We don't want to have to pull together a special meeting if we don't have to. If we can get 90% of the questions and concerns here, and then just address whatever questions and concerns come up there.
And I just want to put you in a position to make great decisions, right? So
Right.
I'll bring these and I'll answer any questions. And if you want to change Latinx to Latin American, I'll bring that forward to school perceptions, right?
And if there were other, this is the time, I think this, if there's nothing else, is this everything that we see from here?
I think the process worked. I agree with Craig there. That was new information that I didn't have at the board level.
And that's fine. I just wanted to make sure our process here is working.
Yeah.
That we have the ability, the best we
I
can.
think it is
Yeah,
working.
no, I.
And not, and I wasn't doing this to critique any of you. It's for me, how do I make this process better to make sure we're getting the information that we need? So we're not putting, so we're putting our best foot forward
Sure.
to the full board. So this wasn't reflective of you all. It was reflective of what do I need to do to make sure the sausage is properly made.
As a perfectionist, do you want to perfect the process as much as possible? Is that what I'm hearing?
But you can't.
Pretty
because
much.
You can't control 9 people.
No, but what
Right,
you'll,
like,
what,
we can always hope for that, and I think you do a very thorough job, so.
and for
don't-
me, it's 100%, it's always
Yeah.
about me. When I seek information, it's, okay, what can I do better? How can I do this differently to make sure everybody has what they need?
And
Yeah.
that's why I brought the topic up today,
Appreciate
because I
that.
wanted to be sure we had the discussion, because we didn't really get the chance. It could look very different if we had it, but it wasn't on my radar.
It's all good.
Um,
So, anything else with the survey?
I do have one more. I'm
Please.
sorry, I don't mean to backtrack. When you guys were talking about, the other pages, I noticed, and this is just
Slide number, please.
slide number 4,
Thank you.
number 3, when it says, how would you like to receive school information? I realize that this is a school perception survey, but when I see parent portal such as Infinite Campus, Power School, Peach Star, Skyward, granted, we know we use Skyward, could that be confusing to families that may go, I don't know what Power School is, I don't know what Peach Jar is, I don't know what Infinite Campus is, and then not mark it because they feel like they're not getting the
Sure.
communication.
Can I piggyback?
Do you get what I'm
on-
saying?
Yeah,
Knowing what we know, but I know not everybody may realize that.
I'm gonna piggyback on that.
Mhm.
I'd like to suggest a change to that. You all can correct me. We are moving to a new parent communication portal. Shouldn't that be what's listed there?
Well, this is perceptions.
But as a district, we are moving toward having the communication through that new app, starting Tri3. So that's starting on March 9th.
No, I know, but
So
we
with
can't
that-
change the words.
I'm pretty sure we can
But with
change
this,
these.
we can, oh no, we can't. Well,
Okay, so this is where I get.
but this is where we're confused. But right now, none of these is how we're going to be
I mean, we
communicating.
have Skyward,
This,
but
this,
that's not.
But that's, I'm asking the question that if we're telling people that our primary means of communication is now through this new, I can't even think of the name of it,
room,
this new app, Rooms, do we even want to have those things on there if that's not how we're communicating in a parent situation?
yeah, I consider this it's not, but I consider this to be more of a demographic
Example.
question
I
than
know,
a survey question. And so I can follow up with school perceptions as, can we change it to such as Skyward and Rooms and cut it short?
Or can we just even, if they can't do that in their whole big scheme of things, if they're looking for consistency, can you add Rooms to that list then?
Sure.
because
Because
technically
then
parent
to everybody.
portal is still there.
Right.
You know, it's just giving examples, so
Yep.
maybe it won't mess up the survey,
And
but I just
maybe-
thought I would mention
No,
it.
I like that.
For sure.
And,
Because to me, as an outsider, I'd be like, what? What is
Mhm.
that? What is that? Why
and we
don't I
don't
have
use any,
that?
right,
We don't
right.
wanna cause more issues, and we,
But
we don't wanna cause
the one we
confusion.
have isn't even on there.
It's not even on there, right?
And so if we can't change it a single word, okay, if it is what it is for this year, but then next year, if they can change it for all,
Mhm.
blanket
Right.
to having rooms, so then it would say all this plus rooms, then we're not changing the demographic, you know what I'm saying? We're not
Right.
changing the words at all.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. it
No,
just-
that's a
it
good
caught my
question.
eye,
I missed
and
that
was
one,
like,
so.
yeah, that's still, it's just was
It's great.
making me question.
Anything else?
Comfortable moving this to resolution?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
Charity?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. I didn't see a nod either, so. All right, last up on the agenda then, we have board referendum letter.
So, thank you. Always starting with the why and working hard to inform our public, all stakeholders about the why, what, and how of the referendum. And so with that in mind, there's a draft letter here. The draft letter has been reviewed and revised by Dr. Burke, reviewed and revised by David Schrader, and reviewed and revised by our attorney. And David Schrader suggested that we bring this here, I bring this here for your consideration. The goal would be, we're really looking at working with Melissa Lampy to think about the big things that we want to accomplish each week of March. And so the first week of March, we're doing some newspaper ads. Second week of March, we're doing a mailer, a second mailer. This would fill the big thing of the third week of March. And it's the idea is a joint letter by the members of the full board. And I think ideally we'd have each member of the board sign this. And then we push this out via social media, go to the newspaper and our website. So questions, comments, ideas?
Go ahead, Craig.
Is there going to be any additional accompanying information with this, letter, or is it just this letter? Like
Yeah, we-
any graphs or like,
We really, Don and the group is saying that the third week of March, your information, your historical data, all the graphs, people should know. And by the third and fourth week of March, it is reminding people of the why, what, how, and reminding folks to vote. And so that's kind of the impetus for this.
The number one comment that I've been getting is that 7 million, is that every year? And I'm not sure that, is it the fourth paragraph, whatever it is, where it talks about the revenue limit? If 7 million per year is strong enough so that people aren't surprised, you know what I mean? That we're not hiding that if it were, even if you capitalize per year or,
Bold?
yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
It's easy, yeah.
you know what I mean?
no, I guess I try to understand the premise of your question.
As opposed to a 5-year.
One
memorandum?
time, yeah, a one-time 7 million is different than adding 7 million every year is what,
what I'm,
The way that it's been worded in a lot of the presentations is it's a $7 million recurring referendum. And there are community members, what does that mean?
right,
You know, recurring, you know, is it that, is there a sunset to it? Is there a whatever? So I understand your point in it. It's been clarified at those meetings, but
Right.
when John talks to Susie, who talks to Bill, who talks to, you know, that's where sometimes it gets lost.
It's just not
right.
And what does that
repeated, so
mean?
it's-
Well, I mean, from what I've heard, some people have like this misconception that it's a compounding type of
Yes,
Yes,
referendum.
yeah.
Mhm.
Where it's like 7 million this year, well, then next year's,
Another, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then, you
Yeah,
know,
that's
that way.
another.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's not what this is,
Right.
it's just $7 million.
I'm pretty confident to say that we addressed that in our recent editions of FAQs.
Okay.
Do you think, both Craig and Dan, that paragraph 4 clarifies that?
It's clear enough language for me, but that's because
You know it.
No, and I understand, I'm saying, trying to put a different lens to it. In
Yeah.
line 2, we're saying 7 million per year. In line 3, it's saying, okay, it's about $175 per year for a $250,000 home. And people then could say, okay, my home is 325,000, my home is 178,000. They can then say, oh, it's gonna be a little bit more than one, you know, or it's gonna be a little less than that. Or is that,
I still think it's it could be confusing that they're gonna think every year it's gonna be another 175, then another 175, then, you know what I mean?
well, it is. It's not
It's
a
just
one.
not gonna be 175, 350, 525.
Correct,
Right, right,
I mean, every year they're going to pay the 175.
right, but I don't want them to think that that 175 then turns into 350.
Oh, that way, yep.
so instead of 175 per, does this solve it in line 3 of that paragraph? If approved, the estimated tax impact would be approximately $175 each year for a home valued at whatever. Instead of per, does that
I like that better.
specify it?
Yes,
Yeah.
I would, my only, I guess, feedback on that statement would be, it probably would still be more beneficial to let individuals know the approximate mill rate increase, per thousand assessed. And then say, for example, if approved, the estimated tax impact would be approximately $175 per year in a home valued at, so that they can kind of do the reverse math a little
But
bit.
how do you, if they're, two things, if they're confused by this general statement,
Right, it's
they're really
gonna
gonna
get
get confused by mill rate.
Sure.
And is the mill rate, because it you know,
Well, because each municipality is a little different.
right, so how do you, because they're each different, how do you, that's what I'm getting at, is how do you concisely and consistently state the impact on the mill rate? Because each municipality is different.
Well, it's still gonna be approximately 70 cents. Per, that's gonna be the mill rate increase.
So, and we have that in other documentation. I thought, okay, you're saying to have that 70 cents per
Per thousand
thousand on there.
assessed, yeah.
I get it. I can see why they didn't, just trying to simplify it with a
Right.
monetary amount.
And I can appreciate simple, but we still want to be sure it's simple and clear. So I'm fine either way. I do like the each year. If we are going to continue keep the approximately, that would be my suggestion.
So here's my wondering.
Oh.
I wonder, we have a lot of space down at the bottom.
Say that again.
We have a lot of space, a lot of white space down at the bottom. And maybe there won't be if you have each individual signature in there. But right now, it's looking like there's a room for a table. Sorry, this is the math person in me. Is there a small table? You know, if you have,
Sure.
you have
Yeah.
a visual, doesn't have to be a visual of some sort. It's gonna get lost in the words. To me, this is too long, but I don't have a way to shorten it. So I don't have that. Something that's simple, can walk away with a graphic, is my thought there.
I guess I'm looking at this and I know that there's an email that was specifically created for the referendum. My question is, do we have folks that have the bandwidth to respond to say, recognizing there may be specific questions about the financial component, if you have questions, reach out to this email. And that way, the people who really are seeking to understand and are just like, I don't get it, my house is worth, I don't have a house, is this gonna affect me? You know, there might be people who just wanna ask that question.
I agree.
I don't know, again, I'm speaking from a bandwidth place, not knowing, we don't wanna bury you into 1,000 emails
Yeah.
either.
Well, and some people don't have email, so.
We've added that before, so we can add that.
I think that's a good idea.
One other piece that I have on the letter, just general feedback. In the 5th paragraph, we invite you to visit our website, and the website is linked. You click on that link. I like an easy button. What's it gonna tell me? Okay. It says, take the next step to the journey, April 1st. There is nothing there.
So take it right to the spring referendum page as opposed to the Watertown K-12 page.
Something, because right now this tells me nothing.
Especially because we know a lot of people do this on their phones.
And one thing I learned teaching online is that 1 year, easy button. You don't want 5 clicks to get there. If this is the information, then link it to, and if there's a specific page to have it be that specific page. And if there's something really specific you want, if this is a letter in it, if you normally would have a paper copy and it's the backside,
I think if we are going to do that, then, it could even just say, we invite you to visit our link on our website. Because if you say, it does say visit our website, which is where it takes them, or takes you, is to the website.
Oh, no.
So it's giving you the website to find the information. but-
Yeah, we gotta do better.
Visit our referendum website.
Yeah.
So right now I just think there needs to be a better place that it's going.
So we wrote 2 things as additions. One is the referendum email for questions, and ensure that the website link goes to the referendum page of the website, not the general website. I don't have clarity about the 4th paragraph. I've heard add a graphic. I've heard change per year to each year. I just need clarity on what are the suggestions so I can hit the target.
I like that last one, each year.
Okay.
And I would even like each to be bolded.
Okay.
And then would you recommend that for the 7 million each year, as well as the 175 each year for consistency of language?
You mean in
Yes.
bold?
No,
In bold,
well,
in
instead of
bold
per year,
instances?
per year.
Yes,
Change it
yeah,
both to
I would,
each.
yes.
Okay. So just for my clarity, 7 million each year, and those, we'll bold those.
Mhm.
And then $175 each year, and we'll bold that.
Yes,
I don't know.
And we'll add the email for questions, and we'll clean up the linkage. Anything else?
Would you like to see a graph? From a math teacher perspective, I want you to feel recognized in
I don't even
that.
wanna see a graph, I'll take back the word graph, a visual. I'm trying to wrap my brain around I understand where Craig's point is coming from. I don't understand how to put that into an already cumbersome,
Yeah.
a lot of words on the page. But I do understand, I'm married to someone what's the mill rate? How's that gonna affect me? Whatever. And we wanna do the double check working backwards. So having that for people that wanna use it, what else would be in that, but you don't want it too overwhelming,
I think in a couple of our other pieces of correspondence, they did put tables out there. So I think.
Yeah, you don't want it too cumbersome, but we've hired the Donovan Group. I don't need to come up with what that looks like right now. I think you have
I can
guidance
ask
that,
them, yeah.
mill rate on there, what other pieces, they've done this before, that would be good, but for people like me that see this, they might read the first, this is too much to read. There's a lot of words on this page, and you're gonna have a lot of people that don't read all those words. So what can you do to have something that kind of still summarizes it in a visual?
So I'm gonna kind of change the role a little bit here. If you go on the link, oh shoot, did I get out of it? If you go on the, hold on, I just had it. If you go on the link, it talks about the impact. Oh, there we go. If you go down, it says property tax impact. And it has the word, the verbiage, an approved referendum would have an estimated school district annual property tax impact. of
Wait, where are you?
Okay, so you go on, click on the link on the letter,
I did, and
and
so
then
on to
go
the
down
district page.
to, scroll down to, on the left, you'll see Jared, do the link above Jared, that's where it'll take you to the referendum page.
Road to the.
This just shows you how that needs to be fixed. Road referendum, and then you scroll down, you'll see road referendum, you'll see about the referendum.
So I'm clicking on Jared.
No, the one above Jared, the referendum one.
Yes,
Taking the
road-
next step to the
got it.
journey. And then you scroll down, I don't know if there's pages. My point is if you read this, it's very clear, and I think it states exactly what we've been talking about, and maybe the words should be
Smear that.
why shouldn't it, maybe it should be smeared, because then it's familiar, they're gonna see it, they're gonna hear it from the board, they're gonna see it on the page, it's gonna be.
Can you just tell me what document you're on the
Yes.
website, please?
So
Yeah,
it
I'm
is
not
the Watertown K-12 Wisconsin US /page/spring, or dash, I don't know if
Yep.
that's the right, dash referendum.
Okay,
So
I'll
it's
just find
backslash.
That's the hyperlink that should be in that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this
this
is sad
is the
because
link that
even with
just
you
gives
giving me
you-
directions, I still didn't get there.
Are
I'll
you,
show
are you talking about the one that has the list of dates and at the bottom it says property tax impact?
Yes. I just think it's getting all the information in that one, basically phrase.
Just wanna make sure I
It's,
heard
it's
that.
the flyer,
So
the
oh,
flyer
okay,
image, so
great.
that. right
Yeah, it's basically the flyer, but
Yep. Okay, I'll just steal that language.
sorry if I made.
No, that's helpful.
Yeah, I like that.
Wouldn't
No,
that make sense? I just think it would
Yeah.
match, it says it all.
It's just an extra.
The only thing it does say is it does say per year, but that's,
And when it gets to the full, if you agree this should go to the full board, it'll be another chance to take a look at it, right?
Yeah,
Before it goes out.
yeah.
So,
And getting that to the full board, can we please have those revisions all
The revisions will be in
done?
the board docs for the full board, yes.
Got it.
Yep.
I just know we have a tight turnaround
Yep,
and
yep, yep.
it's, yeah, I'm a visual, so to see it.
Absolutely.
Anything else on the letter?
I don't think this needs a resolution, but
Nope.
do we all support
Yeah.
moving it forward? Okay, good, thank you. Yep. Yeah, thank you.
Alrighty, then finishing up today.
I'm sorry, I don't wanna backtrack too much here. I'll look at this letter again. So, I know somebody had just mentioned, like, where people could be contacted. I mean, I think Charity, you mentioned that.
Yep, I'm gonna put it on there.
And at the bottom of that same hyperlink that we're just added, it gives us, please reach out to us. We want to hear from you. Email referendum2025@mywsd.org or call.
Yep, I'll replicate that. Yep.
Okay, sorry.
It's just, no, it's a general email that 4 of us get or something like that, so. Yep.
lucky you.
Yeah.
Then.
We all need more emails.
As we get to closing this up today, I think we'll start, since it's still fresh. Jason, I'm not gonna retype these because you have them, but could you please review the action items from
Oh,
that
sure.
particular item, just to make sure we've captured? We've talked about a lot of parts and pieces, and my one set of ears or his one set isn't enough, but having all of us know, what about this? So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask Donovan Group for suggestions or ideas around a visual. You're talking specific to the letter.
To the letter,
Yep.
yep, and then we'll,
Okay, yep. $7 million each year and $175 each year. I wrote down bold, but then I wrote like, check this, flyer, so I'll replicate that language. I'll make sure that the website is the link to the referendum page, not the general website. And then we'll replicate that email and call us language.
Was there anything that was missed?
And those revisions will be reflected in what the full board sees.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We've done the action items after each topic today. Does anyone need to hear them again, being the end of the meeting? I try, sometimes there's so many that are there. I lose track of them, which is why, as Jason's taking notes, we typically try to do it each section. Are you all okay with that? Okay, and then, because we reviewed all of them, right? I didn't miss one?
Yeah.
All right, you just had I just was reading your book is all.
All the red.
No, I'm saying, yeah, all your red.
Yeah.
And then what Jason and I do is we take the action items from last month and we bring those forward. Those should have been part of, a new practice for our meeting of the chairs, trying to have that as you see on the board docs piece. One thing that we have on there, if you notice, the action items are listed, and those are ones that happened at a previous meeting. Last month, I told you all of the action items from prior had been completed. So these are the action items that came of last month. I'm not gonna do this every month, but just kind of letting you know where they are. And then in parentheses is the date that they were completed. So where it says Diana Johnson will ensure 8170 is brought to the full board for first read, that was done on the 28th. So that's where, hey, that was good, I think I connected with Craig on that day. Can we make sure that this is part of whatever? So if there's ever, that at least gives us a target date, we can go back, look at an email, look at whatever. So as you're looking at action items, we've got probably 8 or 10 action items from today. So this list next month or next time we meet, we'll have all 8 or 10 of those. All of them that are completed will have a date there. The ones that do not have a date would have taken more than one meeting time to get through. That would then come back. So this becomes our running record, so we don't lose things.
Yeah.
In the past, I have a working calendar document for our cadence. That's where it was before, but the meeting of the chairs said they wanted that as something common practice from all committee chairs. So that way all board members have that transparency. So if you're looking, hey, what was the action item? This takes it a step further, that here's the action item and here's when it was completed. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Just so you all know where to look. Again, I'm not taking time every month to go through this, but at least letting you know that this is where it's at and you can find that. Speaking of meeting of the chairs, just as an FYI, I am putting forth the recommendation that we will be having a meeting of the chairs. I stated this to David before, I'm stating it to you, the planning committee right now. There's value to having a meeting of the chairs each year, especially if we have a new chairperson come on for one of the committees, no different than a new member orientation. And so as we look at that, we met as a meeting of the chairs a few months ago. It makes sense to meet again. I'm going to say May, I put May here, question mark for my notes, May, June-ish, to see what do we need? How is it going? Are we moving into a more efficient method of chairing? I know when I first started, it was my first time as a chair. There's things I can learn from others. Hey, Craig, what do you do for this? And is it working for you? Or, hey, I saw Diana, you did this. I'm going to take that, we're all just trying to be better. It's not a critique kind of thing. And with the meeting of the chairs, everyone is invited to that, but it's a committee meeting. So committee members have first preference in terms of the questions and speaking, where other committee members can still participate, but.
Do you anticipate that being early in the month then?
I have no idea, because that will then go to, I guess I should ask Jared on that. Do we set a date ahead of time? If we wait until April to figure out who the chairs are and when they can meet, typically that's what you'd want to do.
Right.
But now we're waiting until the middle to end of April to set a date for May or June. Again, it doesn't have to be in May,
Yeah,
it could be in June,
that's a tricky one.
because then you get into summer.
Well, yeah, I mean, cause like if you happen to have a new committee chair for whatever particular reason, you know, you kind of want to have, want to have that meeting soon enough, right? But then we start getting into meetings and then second week in May right away.
So what will happen is, my intention is this meeting of the chairs would then follow yearly cadence. I would like to have it be twice a year. Once, in the initial, kind of like we talked about with new member orientation, once mid-year, just kind of check in, hey, are things going, whatever. So it would make sense I suppose this should be a chair question, to see if they feel it would be better for a May or a June, for that initial.
And when is the April board meeting? You know that off the top of our head.
Yes,
Next one, this one.
I think it's the 21st.
yes, it's the,
No,
I, for
first
some
is
reason,
Friday.
I don't,
Are you
on my
talking about
calendar, it got messed up. I have HR and the board meeting on the same day, so it can't-
Okay.
March? Are
that
you
can't
asking
be
for this month?
No, for
April. If we
Because
go
normally it's
to
the
the,
last weekend, right, or the last Monday, because it would be the 28th.
Yeah, but if there's first Easter, does that change anything?
Easter
The
is
20th.
That's late, isn't it?
the 20th.
So,
But we don't have an abnormal cadence, I don't think, because of where spring break is,
I think it's the fourth Monday.
the 28th.
Okay, in my onboarding documents, April 28th.
Thank you.
there you
Look
go.
at
Good
you.
use of
You're
resources.
gonna be the go-to.
Thank you
Better
very
pull out
much.
that calendar.
April 28th. So that
You bring that
gives
folder every time.
Exactly.
maybe 2 weeks to have committees set, for the new board reorganization. That's not a lot of time, is it?
No, so we'd have to do June.
Yeah. I mean, but then you're gonna have potentially, well,
We have summer commitments.
yeah, I mean, potentially somebody's gonna be, there might be a change in, chair at some point, and then somebody's gonna be seated that isn't going to have that type of orientation, more or less.
Well, and most likely there will be a new chair, just because
Yeah.
we have
Just the
Mike
nature
doing
of-
2 right now.
Right,
And if there's a shift in president,
Be on the
then
chairs.
it could
Well,
be, it
yeah,
could be anyway.
Technically.
But I'm saying if,
David's
I'm not saying
still
it would be,
around.
but-
and David's president, and, whatever.
right, but if someone else moves into that role that happens to be a chair, you don't do president and chair, so. So are you saying that you don't think it should be May? I'm hearing you waffling. I'm hearing argument, not waffling, argument both ways.
Well, I think it could be early May, but it's just really tight to get,
Couldn't it be any time in May?
it could be, but then, you potentially still run into a situation where, okay, a committee, is going to be, you're seating a new chair in that committee before your chair meeting.
But the purpose wasn't straight up, or maybe there needs to be a separate orientation thing
Okay,
for a chair.
Okay.
This is a checking in
I follow you.
as things are going.
Okay,
So either way, I think we need an orientation if there's a new chair anyway, but
right,
One point of information, May 19th is the meeting following because of where Memorial Day falls, so it's a little bit earlier in the month.
I knew it was
Yes.
April or May, okay. And then I was like, nope, I was wrong on that one, but I wasn't. Not that it affects me, but when I looked at it. I have something to add.
yes,
On our, on board docs, Charity is not listed as a committee member.
okay.
I saw that.
I feel
Too
like
late.
she's,
I
I think I
apologize
saw
for
that.
We'll get that
Thanks,
fixed.
friend.
Yeah, And I
No.
know there was like that weird, and then you
It's-
guys came in, and so I
And-
just thought, especially now forward.
Thank you, and with that, planning always gets a policy too, but policy not so much because they've been meeting every month.
Yeah.
But planning, how many times are we omitted at the board level for conversation? It's not, because it's in every other.
And I knew it wasn't intentional.
So if you're adding
Because we
that,
were just
to
the
the
three of
list.
us for a second.
then the last thing that, thank you. The last thing I have, this went way longer than I anticipated, but thank you for the very, very good conversations through it. Our next meeting is May 7th. Close it. I am asking that we please start at 5 PM because progress check number 1 for the superintendent evaluation with Tim Kacher is that night after planning. If you recall, trying to find a date that these piggyback, or that work for the superintendent evaluation is hard, so we've been piggybacking. And so it will be piggybacking either a policy or a planning meeting. This first one happens to be piggybacking with planning. So I have him set to come at 7. He tells me it should be done the target time is 60 minutes, so I'm saying 60 to 90. It could be less than that, but look at today was supposed to be no more than 2 hours. And sometimes you get off on something that goes a little further. So 5 PM, does anybody see a discrepancy? Granted, this may not be the same committee
Yeah, I
that
was
it
gonna
is.
say, I would just have to
but
put it on there.
Right, but I'm saying if somebody knows something right now, calendar wise, hey, no, look, then we will put next meeting, if you can have that as next meeting is 7, and if you could also please put on that progress check 1, and it's identified as progress check 1
At 7.
at 7.
We're starting
The
at
meeting
5.
is-
We're starting at 5.
Yep, got it.
So both of those pieces will be on there, for everyone. Anything else?
I move we get out of here.
8:05. Wait a second. And I won't say it's good having you, because I have you next month again.
You do, sorry.
What?
You were trying to get rid of me already last month, but.
Just that letter.
So you guys are meeting.
I didn't, yeah, are you, it's